Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, welcome to a new year and another episode of Heavy Metallurgy. I am your co-host, Alan, and I am joined, as always, by the irreplaceable, or the worm, Rictonen.
Oh,
Marty.
that's so not true. I'm easily replaceable.
But don't tell them that, otherwise,
okay.
I'll start getting applications, and I don't want to deal with that. But Marty, we're 3 days into 2025. How's it treating you so far?
Fine. It's fine. Busy. You know how it is.
Oh, yeah.
Doesn't matter the year. It's always going fast. Goes fast. How about you?
New Year's Day, everything's quiet, and January 2nd, everything just kind of, hits the gas and it's full speed ahead once more. Back to business as usual.
Yep. Take unsuppress the pause button and go for it. Yep.
Indeed. Yep. Hello to Aaron and everyone else filling in the chat. See William there. Steve, good to see you. Steve, I checked out that Emerald album that you sent me the link for, and that was really, really cool. So yeah, thanks for recommending that one. I'll try to add it to the chat a little bit later in case other folks want to check it out too. Randy, good to see you. Tony, Jurgen, lots of regulars coming in. James, good to see you too, man. Thank y'all for taking some time this evening to join Marty and I. And we have a really cool guest to bring out here in just a minute. It's his first appearance on Metallurgy, and somebody that reached out to us after seeing one of our other episodes was interested in joining in the fun, and we were very excited to make that happen. Before we bring him out, Marty, do we have any quick announcements that we need to make for anything or anyone?
Nothing I can think of. I know tomorrow night on Gas Masks and Hand Grenades, he's having a massive 2024 year-end extravaganza. They're going to be going on for a long time. Bunch of people sharing their best of the year.
Yeah, they're rotating through time zones. So he's literally starting with some guys from Europe, then bringing in some East Coast guys. Later he'll bring in some West Coast guys. So really cool format. It'll go for a long time. So yeah, if you got a kind of laid back, easy Saturday and want to check that out, you'll have plenty of opportunities to jump in and see how it's going. I'm sure it will be a lot of fun. Jeff's streams always are.
Yeah, but let's get Daniel in, and I just want to say, to introduce him before we do, this guy has written two massive tomes documenting Swedish counterculture. He's done the Swedish Sensations films, a clandestine history of sex, thrillers, and kicker cinema. That came out in 2011. And I think a lot of people here will know of him for writing Swedish death metal in 2008. And he's been in a bunch of bands. Let's bring him out. Daniel Ekeroth, welcome.
Hey.
How you doing?
Pretty good. But I've been sick a couple of days, but it's getting better.
Excellent. Well, it's a pleasure to have you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. It's my honor.
Yes, thanks for reaching out and helping get all this set up. We know it's very late where you're at, so we appreciate you pulling the graveyard shift to hang out with us tonight.
I'll push through.
You're not alone. We tend to have a lot of European viewers this late. People just can't go to bed, it seems. So I get it. I understand. But welcome. And before we get going too far into our topic tonight, we need to talk about the books. We definitely do. And the last one, the Swedish Sensations films, that was 2011. You've had a bit of a break in the book front. What's been going on with the writing? I know you are busy right now, but what you got going on?
Well, aside from work, I don't work right now, so I shouldn't say that. But I've been playing a lot with my bands, and I have been working on a new book, and it's half done. But as you get older, your process gets slower. So, but I'm working on a book about Swedish extreme hardcore from the 80s. Crust punk, the bands like Anti-Cymex and Mob 47, those bands. So hopefully I will finish that in a couple of years. and then I've been recording a lot of records and touring and
Right.
All the usual stuff. Good deal.
Yeah, this Swedish death metal book, I mean, this was kind of a revelation. I mean, this book was like a Bible for me. I went through this thing with pen and paper, all the shit I missed over the years, and you were kind of the first to really delve into this topic. I mean, obviously you were in the trenches when this stuff was going on. You talk to us a little bit about the madness of putting this all together, if you want.
Well, I lived in the countryside in the, north of Stockholm, couple of hours north of Stockholm when I grew up. And it so happened that the main venue for death metal was right next door to me in the forest. It's an old cinema. They turned it to a venue, and they started to bring bands over there in '88. So the first show they had was Napalm Death, and I didn't know anything about anything more extreme than Slayer at that point. So that was an eye opener, and I started to leave thrash metal behind and go into more extreme stuff. So I saw all the bands in the late '80s, and it was my the period when I turned from a teenager to an adult. It was the death metal movement, and I didn't have a camera back then, and I never kept a diary, so I kind of wanted to document those years. That's why I started a book, and it started as a list of demos that I had lost over the years. So I used to have that. I used to have that, and what else is there? And that list grew very big, and then at one point I just said, let's just make a book out of this. And I had already done 2 books at that point. The Sensations films, the Swedish version came out in the early 2000s.
Oh, okay. I was just looking at the numbers I was seeing on Amazon. And,
And I also done it. I also done a book about Italian horror movies. So,
that was Violent Italy, was it?
Yeah. But that's more like an attempt at the book. It's not really something I would like people to read now. So, but that's how it started, and it was a project that got out of hand, and suddenly I had this massive book together, and I did it completely alone, no help from anyone. And it was time to release it. I said I started a publishing house myself, and sold my records and movie collections to pay for everything, and then hope that somebody would buy it. I didn't have any, means of selling the book, and it's like, how do I sell the book? And somebody told me there's a thing called MySpace. You can maybe sell it there. So I put it on MySpace, and I sold out in 6 months. So
wow,
nice.
It was like today that would never happen. It was just lucky.
Well, right time, the right subject matter for sure.
It was one of the earlier books like on extreme metal. There's been a lot, that have come out since then. Different books. But yours was one of the really early, really good and detailed, thorough looks at a scene. I think that inspired other people to do the same later.
Albert's book came out when I was just finishing my book.
That was the one that was close around then.
And I really like that, and then I got to know Albert, and he's a great guy. And but now it's so much. It's like there's a special book about everything.
It kind of took off. You were ahead of the curve, I believe.
Well, if you're old, you're ahead of everything.
This is true. Well, being kind of in the trenches and in bands, when you were talking to bands to compile all this stuff, were they receptive? I mean, do they like the idea? Were they helpful, or was it kind of like a meh?
I mean, they were friends of mine, so I think they have the attitude of, this is just like a fanzine interview in the 80s. The fanzine will never come out, but it's fun to sit and talk about it. So I think everybody was surprised when the book actually was released. And the release party, I managed to get the first one. I had 2 parties. The first one was Grotesque and Nirvana 2002 played. And that really, really surprised people. And so sold hundreds of books that very first night. So
that's awesome. Great. That's great. The scene coming out and helping out a friend. That's awesome.
Yeah, and then many bands reformed after that. But I wouldn't say it was because of the book, because I think it was in the air already. It was time, because people were still young back then, and they could do it. And so I'm happy. It was like being a teenager all over again.
Right. Probably turbocharged the scene a little bit then too, didn't it? Give it a little shot in the arm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's part of the fun too. I mean, I think a lot of people have the same reaction reading it, that, yeah, you kind of, start to remember all those, different demos and bands. Like, oh yeah, I haven't thought of that particular one in years. We used to listen to that all the time and stuff. So the readers, I think, got the same reaction of thinking, yeah, it's just like revisiting your teenage years, because, some of those things you keep up with and remember, but there's always some that you forget about over time too.
So comparing, obviously movies have a humongous fan base as well. And how was your experience working, with the cinema side of things as compared to the musical side of things? Is there just as rabid of a fan base? I know a guy that contributes for us and he does Explosive Action, Simon, massive movie guy. Especially with Swedish cinema. How was it received, and did it exceed your expectations?
No, you have to understand that the movie geeks, it's a much smaller group of people. But I enjoy doing it because when I can tell you that I was a record collector since the age of 10, and I bought all the money I had went to records, everything.
Yeah.
And then in the early to mid 90s, CDs started to take over from vinyl. I think Sweden was the last country in the world that held on to vinyl. So vinyl dominated until 92, 93 in Sweden.
Okay.
And then CDs took over, and the new releases came out on CD only. And I hated CDs, and I still do. I don't have a single one, and I never will. So I stopped buying records and started to collect movies. I went to flea markets and bought, horror movie tapes that you can get for a couple of bucks. And I got really into Italian horror cinema and wrote that book. And I even moved to Italy to pick up movies.
Oh, wow.
And then, as you saw, there was a couple of well-known Swedish movies like Thriller and a few more that I knew about. But then I started to dig deeper and see what else is there. So that was a very interesting time to discover all of this forgotten Swedish movies. So, but that was a very lonely work. I sat at home, watched the movies, wrote a little bit about them, and then took the next movie. But so it was a fun time. But there is not a big audience for it. But maybe one day, maybe one day.
Never know.
Mm-hmm.
And there's Simon right there, big movie buff guy right there, down in Australia. Simon.
Yeah, Australia has a very good exploitation movie scene too. I don't know if it's a scene, but they have very interesting movies.
Well, getting out of the books and into the band stuff, it's good to get someone on here that has weathered the storm throughout the years. And I just want to know, as a guy that's getting a bit older, not calling you old by any means, but I mean, you were in a bunch of bands early on and you are still in a bunch of bands. What's the difference? I mean, obviously we're older, maybe a little smarter. What's the big difference between being a musician in Sweden today than it was when you were a teenager?
When I was a teenager, I could say the fun thing was just to be in a band and rehearse. We loved rehearsing. And we got the whole house. The municipal provided us with a whole house that we could use as a rehearsal room. And we spent all our time there just playing and playing and playing. And it was so fun. And we had, dreams of making a records. And then one of my first punk bands, we appeared on a compilation album in 87, I think it was. And that was like, oh, we made it. Then it's like, it was all fun, and we, few local shows, and you were so happy and everything. But then you got into a more serious band and got record deals and tours and everything. And the first time you do everything, it's super fun. The first record, the first tour, it's like. And today it's more like, how fun will this be? So you're offered this tour. How fun will this be? How much money will we make or lose? So it's different, and we never rehearse anymore, ever. So if you have the live set, you should have enough gigs a year so the live set works, no problem. And when you make the record, you sit at home and you learn the stuff as good as you can, and then you rehearse a couple of times to make it work. And that's how we work now.
Yeah.
You also have it. As you get older, you get less and less time to do stuff. That's how it feels. It's like, how did we have all of this time when we were young? And time just slips away. So it's getting harder.
Yep. That's a good observation. Yeah, I feel the same way. It's like when you're a kid, you have all the time in the world to do things, but none of the money to make it happen. And then as you get a bit older and settled in, you're financially, you can do more things, but you don't have the time to do them anymore.
Yeah.
Jürgen here is asking, Daniel, are you still in contact with Anders from Unleashed?
Oh yeah. He's a good friend. So he lives. He also lives in the southern part of Stockholm, but a bit further away than Dan. But he takes his motorcycle once in a while and come by here to buy records from me.
Well, I'm going through your roster of currently active bands. We've got Iron Lamb, Horndal, Martyrdode, Tyrant. You got everything from heavy metal, some sludge / hardcore, crusty, blackened stuff, some black thrash. It seems like you got a lot of bases covered. I'm assuming you have a varying interest when it comes to music.
Oh yeah, I collect all sorts of music, and I enjoy all sorts of music. And I come from a family with my dad was a jazz prog musician, and he had bands when he was young, like jazz prog bands, and one of the very most famous Swedish prog band, Nationalteatern. That the guy who started that band and my dad went to school together and had a jazz band before they started that. Nationalteatern is a major band in Sweden. It was. They don't exist anymore, really. So I had music growing up, and the Iron Lamb is on hold now. I don't think we will do anything more, but Martyrdöd, as it's pronounced.
Sorry.
Tyrant.
Americans, dumb Americans.
Yeah, and Horndal is Horndal are doing stuff at the moment, and Horndal is going very well in Sweden. Well, we try to reach abroad. We will make a small European tour in February, and
nice.
We'll see if we can get it going, because it's going really, really well in Sweden. So we should be able to take it elsewhere if we find the time, because we're old.
That just is funny. You say how it's hard you get a bunch of old guys, in the same room. It's difficult. I mean, plus you're in multiple bands. It seems like you're always herding cats, so to speak, trying to get people together.
Well, I don't have children, so that's the only reason I can do this. If I had children, I will not. But I have been working in schools for close to 30 years, so it feels like I've had thousands of children. So
true.
I can't imagine people who works in schools who has children on their own, because you have to take care of people 24/7. Those people are the true heroes of this world. I don't know how they make it. I could never.
So you said your dad was a musician. Can we assume that you grew up in a household that was supportive of your musical pursuits?
Very much so. We had all the instruments. We didn't have drums, but we had pianos and accordions and violins and guitars and basses. So, and they were very supportive. When I started to use all my money for records, that was, very much supported. When I wanted a computer, it was like, no, that's American bullshit. You cannot have, that's a trend. So I never learned how to use a computer. But I got the guitar instead. This is something you need. So I would probably have a better, more well-paid job if I had got a computer. But I assume I had a lot more fun with that guitar I got when I was 13, 14.
Yeah, I mean, a computer is more... typically inspires more introspection, staying at home, and music is different. It's a social act.
Yeah. I mean, I gave that guitar to a student of mine when I worked in school. So I said, this was my first guitar. Now it's your time to take it over and create something. It was an immigrant from Russia, and Later, I found out that guitar is very valuable right now.
Oh.
But pass it on.
Do you have to carve all the stickers off of it?
No, he can just. I think that was the main part why he wanted it.
Right.
He was into Misfits and Ramones, and I told him, showed him a lot of other bands. So
Yeah.
Very cool.
You got any more stuff, Alan, before we move on to our topic?
No, I think we've got a pretty good look at your background there. And for the show, obviously, I think a lot of people would assume you'd want to talk about Swedish death metal, but you didn't. Right away, you asked if we could talk about French metal tonight.
Well,
so
we should probably do Swedish death metal at one point, but I kind of overdosed on that when I wrote the book.
Understandable, yes.
And I don't follow it anymore. But
it also seemed like just too obvious a topic, maybe.
Yeah. You can read my book. You don't need to hear me speak about it.
True.
Or maybe you do. But
yes, if you want to know Daniel's thoughts, folks, again, just read the damn book.
Yeah, and it's an awesome book. It is really, really well done from start to finish. And
it really is.
So much information, so many things I have not heard of. It was cool to see it all in one place. Very cool.
But when I met my wife, who she lived in San Francisco at the time, I was there on vacation alone, and I had two friends in San Francisco. One was Chris Reifert from Autopsy, and who wrote the foreword to my book.
Yep.
And then a guy called Brian Liu, if you know him. He made that photo book, Murder in the Front Row.
Oh, okay.
He made all the earliest photos of Metallica. So the first day I was there, I set up to meet Brian, and he said, "Oh, why don't we go to Exodus? Because they are my old friends." And we went to Exodus, and then he told me to go to this after party, and that would be fun. The bar next door. So I went there, and I met my future wife. So it worked out perfectly.
Destiny.
And the next day, I had a date set up with Chris Reifert, and my future wife just said, "Can I come?" I said, "Sure." And then we went there, and we have been together ever since. So that was a very good start.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And now she lives you guys are in
She
Sweden,
lives here
right?
in Sweden. Yep. Because if you can choose to live in Europe or America, if you're an idiot, you choose America, because Europe you get so many benefits living in Europe, because you have a lot of countries nearby, a lot of languages nearby, you have free healthcare, you have a lot of stuff you don't get in America. And also to move to America, they treat you like a fucking dirt. It's very hard to move there. I had a friend who moved there, got a kid, got a job, married, and he didn't become a citizen until like 15 years. Mm-hmm. It's hard.
It's hard.
Even though I love many things about America, especially San Francisco, it was easier to do it this way. But however, she asked me early on, "What's your favorite French metal bands?" And I was like, "French metal? They don't have any metal in France." And she said, "Oh, you have no idea." And then I started to dig into it, and the obsessive, archaeological guy I am, I had to dig up a lot of records, and I did. So now I have quite a good collection of French metal, and I love it. It's that I never heard about many of these bands when I grew up, and I was like, why didn't I hear about this? This is as good as many far bigger bands. Mm-hmm. So it was very, very fun to do this, and that's why I want to speak, because I don't really know much about French metal. Yeah. I just want to pass on to other people that maybe do not know these bands, that they should really, really look them up, because some of them are amazing. That's why I think
yeah, it's a good topic, because you're right. There are a lot of very high quality French bands, but other than a few of the bigger names, you don't hear a lot about the scene necessarily. So yeah, I think you're right. It just, for some reason, it gets a little bit overlooked. Do you have any thoughts on why that is? I mean, we hear tons about the German scene, the Swedish scene, British scene. France is right there in the middle of all that, more or less. But so
Yeah.
why does France sometimes get overlooked? Is the scene just actually physically smaller there, or are there just some
No.
other issues?
I think many people have prejudice against France. Like this, it's a very elegant country, and the language sounds gay, you know. And also, people they have problems with French language, which the language is beautiful, and especially when you sing it in metal, it gave this otherworldly quality that you can't get with English or Swedish. Or maybe Swedish for you, but not for me. So I don't know. And also, Southern Europe is often, passed off as something from the past, I guess. Oh, France, Italy, Greece, they were dominating the world way back. And now England has taken over, or Germany. I don't know.
Yeah,
But
I think you have something with the language there is part of it, because a lot of French bands did tend to sing in French rather than in English.
And rightly so. I am so glad they did.
Yeah, but yeah, that does create a barrier for some folks.
Yeah.
'Cause, yeah, especially like for folks in America, some people speak French over here, but not a whole lot, and that makes it. Sometimes it's a little harder to get into the music because you do feel like it sounds cool. I have no idea what they're singing about right now. They could be singing about, some cool dragon fantasy soldier warrior thing, or they could be singing about crepes and cheese. I don't know. So yeah.
I know Martin Popov has a big problem with that. He doesn't like when a band sings in French, but I'm the opposite. I absolutely love it, and it gives it another dimension, and makes the music better.
Yeah, I think, and we'll talk about that as we go through some picks here pretty soon. But yeah, I think a lot of French bands, with the language and the way they sing, at least for a lot of the 80s bands, they did end up with kind of a particular sound that, when I play some of those older records, it's like, yep, they're, even without hearing that, the words are in French, they just sound French. It really does lend itself to a particular style, like you said, that has kind of a classy air to it, for lack of a better description.
And that's the funny thing about looking at Europe. France is right in the middle of it, and it's the music coming from it. It seems like it's been insulated from everything around it. I don't know if that's the language, the whole French culture's perspective on things. I don't know. It's just interesting. And I've often, as an American, I can drive from Michigan through 5 states, and the language is the same. You guys do the same thing in Europe, and the country changes every 3 hours or every 5 hours on your journey. It's mind-boggling how it went down that way, yet it didn't over here. But I don't know. It's that's a whole another conversation, I suppose.
When you make your first European tour, it humbles you, because it's different languages every other day and a different way of doing things or thinking, and it really makes you grow. So if you haven't traveled a lot, do it, because it makes you a better human, I think.
It makes you feel like you're not the center of the universe. Whereas I think a lot of Americans, they born and they die in the same town they were born in. They don't get out. They don't experience travel. They don't experience other culture. And
many Swedes do too.
Really?
Yeah. Many people never leave their hometown, and that makes you very limited in your mind. It's very good to learn another language to start with, because that makes you realize that the way you think is dictated by the language you know. And if you know 2 languages, you can think in 2 ways at the same time. And when I speak to my wife, I think in Swedish, and then I try to explain it in English, and it's like it makes you stop for a moment and think about what you're saying, and it makes you a better person. I'm absolutely sure that it does.
Makes you smarter too. I mean,
I don't know if it does that.
Well, I mean, Americans are at a disadvantage of the fact that in school, taking another language is an option. It
No,
isn't
it's mandatory here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's mandatory where you're
It's
at.
not. It's mandatory to take 2 different languages in Sweden.
Wow.
So I did English and German, and
Nice.
then I moved to Italy and learned Italian. So, and with the Italian, I can read very slowly Spanish and French very slowly, but the words are very similar. So you can kind of get through a little section in a book if I need to know this piece about Def SS or Sortilège. You can get it.
Yeah. Awesome. Alan, you got anything else?
No, I think we are probably ready to dive in and see some cool French albums. Several folks in the chat have mentioned that it's not a scene they're really familiar with, so hopefully we can point out some cool records to them and give folks some interesting things to investigate this weekend. But Daniel, would you like to start with your first recommendation or the first thing you'd like to hype for folks?
I would just like to start with something completely not a record, or just a historical fact that I found interesting, that there's this Belgian-French jazz guitarist called Django Reinhardt that was active in the 40s. He died in 53. And he was playing something called gypsy jazz. I don't know if gypsy is a derogatory term, but the genre is called gypsy jazz. So I refer to it as that. But he lived on the dirty streets of Paris and played guitar. And then he was in a fire, and his two smallest fingers, how do you show? Those two got burned together and became useless. But he learned how to play guitar with 2 fingers. Very, very elaborate guitar. And much later, when Tony Iommi of future Black Sabbath, he had an accident at work, cutting off 2 of his fingers. And he was like, that's it. I can't play guitar anymore, and I won't. And some of his friends told him, have you heard about Django Reinhardt? And he's like, no. And they played it to him. He had 2 fingers. And Tony Iommi realized, if he can do it, I can. And he did, and he created heavy metal. So without that French Django Reinhardt, there wouldn't have been any heavy metal. So you can make the argument that heavy metal exists because of France. That's just how I wanted to start this.
Very nice. Yeah, I remember the story that there was another musician that happened to before it happened to Tony, but I did not remember that it was a guy from France. Very
and
cool.
my dad liked Django Reinhardt, so I don't have any records with him, but that's the first story. And from there, I can also continue with something else that has nothing to do with French music. It's that the fact that there were a couple of French labels that are not known for French music. Like there's a label called X Killer, based in France. They did release a few French records, but I don't have them. But this is a great album they released.
Fantastic album.
Fantastic album. And then the most British of all bands, what would you say that is?
The most British of French bands?
No, the most British of all British bands.
I would probably say Iron Maiden.
Well, I would say...
Yeah, 3 choices: Saxon, Judas Priest, Iron Maiden.
Yep. Fair.
Saxon was released by a French label, which is, to me, doesn't make any sense, but they were. Career Records also had Demon. But to my knowledge, they didn't release any French records. Probably they did bigger rock records, but I don't know. And then the most French metal label of all is Black Dragon. They didn't release any French records, but they released the best Swedish heavy metal of all time, Calabash.
Yep.
So
yeah, they licensed a lot of good U.S. metal as well.
So my first encounter with something French was probably these records that were released in France and pressed in France. but it wasn't French metal. But it just shows that there was things going on in France.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
I don't know, should I go on with a French record?
See.
You can. Sure.
Yeah, if you want to. But yeah, no, that's a good point. That those labels, it does show there was definitely a demand for heavy metal in France. That those labels like Axe Killer and Black Dragon were bringing stuff in and licensing it from other countries.
Yeah.
They weren't doing it if people weren't going to buy it. So yeah, there was an
No.
audience there.
I'm also an interest in metal. So you could tell. Yeah, but Black Dragon had a fantastic output. The Manila Road and Her Apparent and also the logo is so good and everything about that label seems classy, and they should have had a couple of the French bands, but they did not. I don't know if someone want to take over or if I should go into a French band.
Yeah, we can. Do you want to go ahead and do one French one if you want to?
Okay,
We'll
what should I
officially
start?
launch it.
I probably should start with the first one I heard, which is probably the first one. And it's a band called Rust.
Oh, yep. Mm-hmm.
And this is the first Trust album, and I think it's the best. I have them all. I really love this band. But Trust, I will take out more records soon. Trust is one of those bands that they were in the record stores, and they were on a lot of the those compilation albums that came out, and you heard them on radio even in Sweden. It was a band that got around. So I heard them very early on, and I really liked them. They kind of this brutish, almost punk. It's like a mix between AC/DC and punk. That's how I feel. And the connection to AC/DC was actually very strong because Bon Scott was the one who translated their lyrics into English early on, apparently.
Oh, cool.
So that's what I've heard. I don't know if it's true, but it seems plausible to me. But that singer of Trust, he has this completely angry voice, and I really love it. It's so good. But to me, they're more of a punk band than a metal band. And I think most people probably discovered them through the Anthrax cover of Antisocial.
Yeah, for sure.
But you should check out the Trust records, and especially the French versions, because they are far stronger than the English. He sings with more, power in French.
Confidence, I would imagine.
Yeah. It's so massive and great.
Yeah. Well, if they're written in French, the rhythm and everything, the meter's meant to be sung that way. So when you translate it, a lot of stuff isn't going to fit. The lines aren't quite mesh with the music the way that you intended them to, because things are getting lost in translation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, their lyrics is so hard. If you can listen to the English, but the French versions of the lyrics are always much harder than the English ones. There's an example that I wrote down, because it's in French. They sing something that means you work all your life just to pay for your tombstone, which is very direct. And the English translation is you're on a trade ride to no importance, which is not as powerful.
Yep.
So
Something lost in translation.
Yeah, it really is. So they have these lyrics against the government, against violence, against Christianity, against Islam in the early 80s. I mean, can you imagine a black metal band doing anti-Islam? They would never dare to. That would make them... This was a hard fucking band. And they were the biggest French metal band of all back then, by far. What else can I say? Then that's the obvious thing, that when Clive Burr quit Iron Maiden, they got the guy who plays drums on this Trust record, Nico McBride.
Nico,
Yeah. he played in Trust, and Iron Maiden and Trust played together, and they realized, oh, well, Clive is quitting. We get Nico in. So, and what do you think Clive did then?
Join Trust.
He joined Trust. So Clive plays on this record. But he only plays on the French version. He was only in the band for a short time to help them out. So the English version of Ideal, the fourth Trust record, I think, doesn't have Clive. So you have to get this. If it looks like this, you're fine. Then it has Clive on it. And I mean, Clive Burr is a way better drummer than Nico McBrain, to me.
I agree. I've said that before, and people don't like that. They don't like hearing that, but
they
it's
are
true.
insane. Listen to Iron Maiden live when they play the old songs with Nico. They don't sound right. They have never sounded right with Nico. But Nico is a fantastic drummer too, but he's way more flashy. He doesn't have the same cerebral beat that Clive Burr had.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's why I only liked the first two Iron Maiden records. So there you have it, Trust. That's a band everybody should listen to. So angry, so down and dirty. Not every song is good, but the ones who are great. And also take your time to translate the French lyrics. They are fantastic. Really killer stuff. And that's the first French band I've heard about. I had no idea they were French, but they were big even in Sweden at the time.
Yeah, that's kind of the perfect band to start with, for sure. Like you said, they were very well known. They got a lot of exposure through compilations and everything. And yes, the Anthrax cover song certainly didn't hurt matters any. But yeah, I think they're a band that sometimes now gets overlooked because they were big early, and then as time's gone on, people have kind of forgotten about them. But
last time I saw Anthrax was at Slayer's last gig, and Anthrax had like a 15-minute set, but it couldn't help playing Antisocial. So they just had to.
Yeah.
So one of the 5 songs they made was that Trust cover. That tells you something about how good that song is.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, and you described them really well. They always had that punk vibe was very strong in their music.
All right, Alan, French metal.
All right. Well,
Your thoughts?
Daniel started with one of the absolute key ones. I'll follow up with another one of the absolute key ones. Even decades ago, when you didn't have the internet where you could easily check things out, whenever French bands came up, there was always one album that tons of people would gravitate towards. It seemed everybody had heard this thing. It was this one, Sortilège, with the Metamorphose album from 1984. Really cool cover art with some kind of giant monster thing going on there. I've never known quite what's happening here, but definitely looks cool. This is one that, like some of the other albums, there's 2 versions of it. The pressing on Devil's Records came out, and it is sung in French, Metamorphose, and the version when it was licensed with Steamhammer, it was redone, and it's all in English. So depending on which copy you got, it was in different languages. Really, really good album. Very kind of straightforward, classic, mid and early 80s heavy metal sound. The SPV. What have you got, Daniel?
That's a promo sheet for the... Actually, it came out on both French and English, on both Steamhammer and Banzai. So...
Oh, that's right. There was a Banzai pressing too. I forgot about that one.
The record is very spread. Here's the Banzai. Oh. It was very spread, and even in Sweden, you saw it everywhere.
Yeah, and even in America, it apparently had pretty good distribution, and folks always checked it out. And most folks that have heard it have really, really enjoyed it. It's one that was always kind of cited as a highlight, not just from French metal, but from metal for that period, the kind of pre-thrash metal years when this kind of stuff was very popular. Noted someone, I think Ryan made a joke about this earlier in the chat, but noted the vocals being pretty high, but very good. It's a very energetic, very forceful sounding album. And Sortilège, their history is kind of has interesting little things in it. I'll pull up a couple of other items here. Before that album, they released an EP. This is the cover, just a self-titled EP from about a year earlier. The EP came out on, yep, there it is. It came out on Ravon Records. It's catalog number 3 in the Ravon discography, which means it's right behind the Merciful Fate EP. Nuns Have No Fun. So they were kind of a label mates with Merciful Fate at that point. And they made a second album, and you see the cover for this one from time to time, which also had the releases done in both French and English. Yes, Heroes Tears, which, this one has the English title, but you can get copies done on other labels where it's all in French and sung in French. But then that was kind of it. The band just had the 2 albums early on. It seemed like they blew up, got a lot of exposure, and then disappeared. Currently, they're one of those bands that, while they've gotten back together, they've ended up splitting. And there's 2 versions of Sortilège out there. One version has some of the old members, and the other version has some of the other members. It's similar to what's happened to bands like Venom and Witchfind, where you have Venom and then Venom Incorporated and stuff like that, which it's always a shame to see that happen. Not only is it confusing for fans, but just the fact that they all wanted to get back together to do music, but they couldn't get on the same page, and it devolves into squabbling over the rights to the name is always kind of a downer. But yeah, the Sortilège Metamorphosis album has been an old favorite for lots of heavy metal fans worldwide. If anybody hasn't checked that out somehow, and you're interested in metal from that period, and you want to check out a really classic one from the French scene, Metamorphosis is kind of the starting point. That and Trust are your 2 touchstones for the real early French heavy metal scene, I think. So that'll be my first one, and big thanks to Daniel for having the actual records. I do not have. I'm going to have to go to the phone for a lot of items tonight, unfortunately, because some of this is stuff I had, but it's been sold over the years, and some of the things I'm going to mention later just really haven't had a physical release since like demo tape days. But I've got some CDs and a little vinyl to show as well. But now it's Marty's turn to show off.
I just want to say a little bit about this.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Because the first EP, which I think is by far the best Sortilège release, this was very spread in Sweden. Because Ravon Records seem to have a good distribution in Sweden. Even Metal Clogs, the compilation album, you could get here. Yep. And the Merciful Fate, of course, since they're...
Yeah, just a CDR copy of it, but the Metal Clogs. This was the first thing released on Ravon. So then Merciful Fate, and then Sortilège are 1, 2, and 3 in the catalog.
But the first Merciful Fate EP and that Sortilège you could find in the record store, even in the forest where I grew up, where there was 20,000 people living. We still had 4 record stores in that city. So
nice.
They all had Sortilège.
Wow.
So, and what is often mentioned about Sortilège is that it was the favorite band of Chuck Schuldiner of Death. And the track Amazon from this EP, the intro of Evil Dead from Scream Bloody Gore, is totally ripped off from Sortilège. It's the same intro, more or less. So they had an impact even in the death metal scene that I grew up with.
Very, very cool. Yeah, nice.
All right. Well, going through preparing for tonight, my French collection is poor. It just is. I remember just getting into the death metal, just putting thrash aside, falling directly into it. Catalogs, albums by Aggressor or Loud Blast. Always interested, always wanted to get them, but they were expensive. Those import prices, I'm like, oh my God, I'm not going to pay. I can buy 2 or 3 other albums for the price, or tapes for the price of this. So there's a lot I've missed, but and a lot of my collection is a lot of black metal stuff. But I just think because what have happened with the Olympics, probably one of the biggest bands in France is Gojira. I'm not a huge fan. I own this album and one more. I never listened to it, but I mean, if your biggest cultural export is a metal band, which they're still a metal band, and you put them on your opening ceremonies for the Olympics, that's pretty huge. It's huge. So, and this is actually a decent record. I haven't listened to it probably since it came out, 2000. I can't read that, 5 or 6. But yeah, I mean, this is a solid band, and they're a bit different than a lot of the more popular bands out there. They've got a great drummer, interesting riffs. I mean, you got whales on. Thankfully it's not a dolphin, or it will be stricken from the record by Professor Steele.
Whales and dolphins are different, so they're cool. They're cool. It's all good.
But yeah, definitely not the most underground or cult pick from me this time around. But I figured with all of the exposure, I mean, being not really compromising, going out with a heavy ass song on the Olympic opening ceremony, piped into millions and millions and millions of TVs across the world. That's kind of huge. It's kind of huge. And whether you like it or not, their longevity is to be applauded. And they definitely currently, as far as the modern metal French scene, they're keeping France on the map.
No, that's a good one to mention earlier. You kind of have to. I mean, Daniel and I.
Well, you don't have to, but
you should. I mean, Daniel and I, started with some of the main ones from the past. But Gojira is obviously like the top French band going currently. So deserve to be mentioned. They're a band I haven't checked out a lot either. I've gotten the sense that maybe they change a bit from album to album, so it makes me hesitant. I don't really know where to start, if there's going to be like one album that's better than the other, or with my luck, I'll pick the one that I would like the least, and then I'll be scared off the rest of the catalog. But I've heard songs here and there by them. I've just haven't dug into them yet. Daniel, are they a band you're familiar with? Do you keep up with some of the
first
ones
time?
Like that?
The first time I heard about them there was a review when they were, I guess, a new band. They compared them to King Crimson. It's an old progressive band from the 70s that I love. So I checked them out, and I couldn't really get into it. I have this, disease that as soon as I can sense new metal in a metal band, I don't like it. And I have the problem with Opeth. Like Mikael Åkerfeldt is one of my best friends, but I just don't like this sugar metal. And Opeth, the last album they made, In Cauda Veneno, masterpiece. But it's the only Opeth album I like. So, and Gojira has that too. They have a little bit sugar, but
it is modern.
But they are different, and they have integrity. And they have been very successful. So, I mean, it's a credit to them. It's just not for me. But I was very happy to see them at the Olympic. I was on vacation at that time. We saw it on TV in a bar in Czech Republic. I was like, this fucking metal band playing at the... But just that is... France should have all the credit for doing that.
Absolutely. All right, I think we're back to you, Daniel, for your next pick.
What should I take next? I will probably go a bit early. Yeah, I should. This is a band called Silver Train that I did not know anything about. I never heard of them until a couple of years ago when I was at a local record store here in Stockholm. It's a very good record store that very expensive, but they get in all the right sort of stuff. And while I was in there, the guy who had the store said, you should go around the corner. There's a secondhand store. And they got in a metal collection. And I bought everything that I know is worth having. But you should go and check because you know more than me. And I said, I probably don't. But I went there, and there was a bunch of Accept, Demon, good records. And there was this Silver Train, which looking at the cover, I thought this must be a prog record.
It looks like it.
Yeah. So I bought it, and I had no idea it was French. I just I was going through hundreds of records and picking out everyone I thought was looking interesting. And then I went home and listened to it, and it turns out this is a French hard rock band. And this album, Which Platform Please, came out in 1979. So you can argue this is the first French hard rock album. You could probably make that. There's another band that might take that position, but this is one of the very first one, and it's really good. This is an album. If you can find it, just pick it up. It's this laid-back 70s hard rock prog. It reminds me a little bit of early Manila Road. A little bit a laid back Iron Maiden. They have all sorts of things going on. Really good vocals and a soft metal, but still metal feeling. And it's a really good album. It's one of the best ones we will speak about tonight. So I don't know anything else about the band. Do I have any information written down? They're from Strasbourg. That's a. And they were active 78 to 83. So this album came pretty early on. They also remind of 70s Scorpions. That's the best comparison.
Ah, okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've heard the name, but I've never gotten to check them out. So it sounds really interesting.
Yeah. And if you like 70s Scorpions, check out the Silver Train. Which
I don't know, 70 Scorpions.
That's all I like.
I can do that. Absolutely.
All right. Silver
and
Train.
I mean Uli Roth era, not not Schenker or the guy who replaced
Matthias Jabs or
Did he join in the 70s or was it just the 80s? Because I think Michael Schenker played.
It's close, yeah.
Isn't it? What is it? Blackout or is it Love Drive? Is the first
Love
one
Drive is the first.
I think
one.
Love Drive has a lot of Michael Schenker on it because he came into the studio.
Yes, it's the album. Yeah, he came back for briefly.
And since then, he has tried to take all the credit for that album. I don't know if it's justified or not. I mean, he's a great guitarist, of course, but I don't know if his output since Scorpions and UFO has been that impressive.
Yeah, he definitely has a fan base, but
he definitely has a fan base. Yeah.
And great guitarist, of course.
Oh, genius.
All right, Alan.
I'm gonna get more coffee, so
go for it.
Sure thing. Yep. All right. Well, let's see. When we got started, Daniel mentioned that there were some French labels that tended to put out non-French heavy metal bands. X Killer and Black Dragon. Both those labels licensed a lot of stuff from other parts of Europe and from the United States. There are also you can do that in reverse. There are some non-French bands that often get mistaken for French bands that I just want to mention quickly because it's kind of amusing that these bands aren't French. One of them is Chateau. Great new wave of British heavy metal band. They were on the Ebony label, did 3 really good albums. And a lot of people, because of the name, always assumed, they must be from France. But no, they were a UK band. The exact same thing happened to this band, Le Griff. Le Griff, they're obviously French. No, it's another British band. They just used a French name and put out 3 12-inch EPs. 2 of them are really good. The third one only has 2 songs and there's a remix or something. So that one's not so essential, but the others are great. But they also constantly got mistaken for a French band, even though they weren't. So the take-home lesson is, if you're going to pick a French word or phrase for the name of your band, don't be surprised if a lot of people start assuming that you are a French band, even if you're from somewhere else.
I did.
Lots of folks did. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. But now let's move on to one that is actually a French band and worth mentioning. This is a band called Steel Angel. They made 2 albums. This is the second one called And the Angels Were Made of Steel. Interesting kind of clockwork angel type, a little bit of a steampunk kind of design to the cover there. This one came out in 86. I think the other album came out the year before. And this one is on the Devils Records label, which it's on the thumbnail. and we were talking about it with Daniel backstage before we got started tonight. Devil's Records, very distinctive, cool-looking label. Not a very big label. They only had about 24 or so releases, but they were definitely one of the labels for actual French bands. Yes, there we go.
Their logo is Lemmy. It looks like Lemmy with horns.
Well, how more metal could you be?
Yeah.
But lots of very good quality things came out on the Devil's label. They've been hard to find for a fairly long time, and some of them have gotten kind of pricey as a result of that. Steel Angel is one of the only ones I've ever stumbled across in the wild. Really good band, and they have what I kind of consider the classic mid-'80s French sound. A lot of the bands, from that era, they tended to have, good vocalists who worked in a little bit of the higher range, not like really shrill or anything, but just not like a really deep type of voice, a little bit higher, a little bit cleaner. They focused, a lot of influence you would assume from something like Iron Maiden. Steel Angel does like a lot of those, sort of, mid-paced, gallopy song structures. They could work in a little bit of the epic flair when they wanted to. They do it really good on a song on here called The Law. So they kind of drew some influence from the new wave of British heavy metal scene. A lot of these bands also, though, I think incorporated elements from the Swedish scene. I definitely hear parts of early first wave of Swedish heavy metal in some of these French bands like Steel Angel. So not one that gets mentioned or shown much, but I've always enjoyed this album. I always go back to it. It's one of those that does sit on the sidelines for a while, but I'll pull it out every couple of years, spin it, and I'm always impressed at just how solid it sounds. Good stuff. Production could have been a little better. Maybe that's not necessarily the band's fault. Maybe just needed a little bit of a tighter sound. But Steel Angels. The angels were made of steel. Good example of that kind of classic French metal sound, and a good example of one of the strong albums from Devil's Records.
All right. Well, let's get the somewhat strange out of the way here. This all kind of boils back to Ministry. Once Ministry had a breakthrough album where they unified industrial concepts with metal, a lot of bands sprung up all over the world, and France was no exception, except their take on it was very strange. And I would give you Trimpanum Pal, the self-titled debut, and their second one, Aggravation. This is, I bought this on tape when it came out in 1989 because it was on Road Racer Records, and obviously it was on a label that was our internet. It's on this label. I'm going to buy it no matter what it is. And what I heard here, starting off with the black box, it is very strange, plodding. Sounds like a drum machine. The other album, it sounds like it might be real drums on it. But very broken English, of course. But they try. The album, the band is a bit perverse. It's just a very weird concoction of an electronic industrial vibe. But they don't go completely full into that realm. It's there. It's a feeling. There's a bit of a punk simplicity to it. And of course, the high gain bite of the guitars is very much metal. It's just very clean. It has a cleanliness to it that feels electronic. It's very twisted and strange. It was a soft mouth vagina. The Prettiest Star, In and Out. I mean, it's like I said, there's an element of perversion to this, and I don't know. I always liked this band. It's not something I'm listening world rocking all the time. We'll just say that, but I've always appreciated it because they really sounded like nobody else in my collection, and I picked up several more albums over the years of theirs that aren't as good as the first two, but it's just one of those bands. I think it's still around today. And there's other bands that sprung up in that. There's another band called Phobos. I thought I had a copy of the CD, but I couldn't find it. So I mean, every country had the industrial infusion into the metal, and this is a band that encompassed several different genres to arrive at something weird. And it's kind of amazing that Road Racer Records picked up on them because they didn't really fit with what was going on at the label in 1989. For sure.
Yeah.
I had one of those records, but I don't really remember.
It's weird. Put it on again,
Yeah.
you'll be like, oh, okay. And it's something you listen to because it's so unique from everything else during the time. Anyway.
Okay.
All right. Daniel, you're back, and I'll be right
Well,
back.
I can continue. This is a good segue because I have a band here that is one of the earliest French bands. They're not metal, but they are kind of industrial. So it's probably also a band that people might have picked up looking for metal, because the band is called Metal Urbain. And this is not a metal band; it's a punk band, but they have a drum machine, so they're very different. And this they released 3 7-inches in 77, 78, and they're very good. They are, I think also they were the first punk records ever released that wasn't in English; it's in French. So I think metal. I know Don Edman loves these bands too. It's very hard, very aggressive punk, 70s punk with an industrial feel. And really they were at the forefront of punk. I mean, if you compare them to Sex Pistols, this is in a different world. It's just far ahead of Sex Pistols. And I really love it. And I think many people, but one of the reasons I wanted to mention them is because there's a Swedish band, not really punk, but a Swedish, I would say, mix between punk and a comedy act called Onkel Konkel. This band, everybody in Sweden knows, because it's the most politically incorrect record ever made. Like, everything that you should not say, it's said on this record. I mean, if it's handicaps, homosexuals, Nazis, everything is out there with a very tongue-in-cheek style. And this band was kind of, when I was a teenager, this was, everybody listened to it. Nobody knew who they were. It turned out it was just one guy making it alone. Everybody listened to it, and it was like the most passage of time. You have to go through that to become an adult. And then a friend of mine put together 3 live gigs with this band in the early 2000s, and he called me and said, "Do you want to play bass?" And I was like, "Yeah." So I did. I played bass with, and it sounds like Metal Urbain with the incorrect. I played bass, and the drummer I had at the time in my band, Incision at the time, but also later in Iron Lamb, and he was also in a band called Repugnant at the time. And we rehearsed for a couple of times, and we couldn't get it right because the guitarist was not good enough. And then we said, can't we bring in our friend on guitar instead? And we did, and that guy is Tobias Forge, who now has Ghost. So we toured in Sweden, and that was his first encounter with big audience, was that Onkel Konkel tour. And we did 3 sold-out shows in Sweden with 1,000 people at show.
Wow.
It's also my biggest concert at the time, too. So, and that Onkel Konkel is very inspired by Metal Urbain, French punk band, which the guy, he died, unfortunately, like 15 years ago, and we went to the funeral. But he told me the 2 bands he liked the most was Metal Urbain and the Vibrators. So there's a French inspiration there for even Swedish politically incorrect joke bands.
Ruthless Metal asked Daniel about his time in the Swedish show Baron.
The pub. It was a TV show, a bunch of nobodies could run a bar, and it was cameras. If you have seen the show like Big Brother or Survivor, exactly the same thing, but it was in a bar. So you ran a bar, and every week someone got voted out, and I was on it, but it was good. It was a bar, so you had free access to beer. which was good.
Perfect.
And then
How they paid you?
yes, more or less.
Yeah.
And then we also have a stage you can book bands, and we played there with my old band Della Morte. Hypocrisy played there. Band called Morte Macabre played there. So you could do a lot of fun things. And then I booked Motorhead to play there, but the owner of this TV show didn't like Motorhead, so he canceled it.
Oh,
so
shit.
Mickey D called me and said, just quit that fucking show and go on tour with us. And I regret to this day that I didn't do it.
Oh my God.
But I got to hang out with them when I played in Stockholm, and it was a good time.
Nice.
But you know, that was, you drank a lot of beer and they filmed you and you did stupid stuff. And I mean, I was unemployed at the moment, so for me it was like free beer and a little bit of free money. And I went very far in that show, so I actually made some good money in the end.
Oh, nice.
So, but that's 20 years ago, so I barely remember it now.
Right.
But when you're young, you do stupid things.
Right place at the right time.
Yep.
Almost
Much
got
better
down
to
to a
do,
Motorhead.
Much better to do the stupid things when you're young than when you're older. Yeah.
All right, Alan.
All right. Oh, let's do another one of the classics from the mid-1980s French scene. This is another one that a lot of people have heard and tend to speak very highly of. I think I always mispronounce the band name. I tend to spell it out. I'm pretty sure it's just supposed to be Addicts, but I always tend to say ADX because they actually spell it out that way. But yeah, this is their debut album, Execution. This was another one that originally came on the Devil's record label. This is obviously just a later CD reissue of it. This is, there we go. Yep. Fantastic speed metal from France. And the Execution one, very nice. Very cool stuff, Daniel. So yes, if you want something that's a bit faster, say, than Sortilège or faster than a Steel Angel type band, Addicts was the go-to band for sure. This is very, very good speed metal. It, you know, leans a little towards thrash, but I think this is one you can pretty clearly say is a speed band closer to something like Agent Steel.
Yeah.
It doesn't have the same kind of thrash chops that you would associate with, you know, your traditional stereotypical 80s thrash, which I don't know if there was a thrash scene in France. I have never come across any French thrash metal. I haven't really looked for it, to be fair. So maybe it's out there and I just never stumbled into it. But yeah, Addicts was more on the speed metal side of things, and they did it very well. Again, another vocalist that, you know, kind of works in the higher register, which seems to be very typical of that time period for French bands. And Addicts made a good run of it for a long time. They released about 4 albums in their original run, stayed around until about 1990, disappeared for a while, and then reformed around 2010, maybe slightly earlier. And they've actually remained pretty active ever since 2010. They've had a string of albums throughout the 2010s, and their most recent album just came out last year. I haven't heard the new one, but I know it's gotten pretty good reviews from folks that did check it out. So yeah, again, a lot of folks will be familiar with this one. There's not much other to say than just, you know, a really fantastic speed metal offering. If that's your jam, then Execution by Addicts is a great album to check out. I think this is one that Eric Bauer has mentioned over on his channel from time to time, and rightfully so.
We did a hour-and-a-half long conversation in the album club on that very album.
Oh, that's right. I forgot y'all had brought that one up. My bad.
Another French band we did was Massacre, the first Massacre album.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway.
Yep, some folks have mentioned that in the chat already, I think.
I love ADX. I think they are absolutely fantastic band. To me, they are Agent Steel, but every song is good. But Agent Steel had a couple of good songs on album. ADX is just fantastic. The 3 first albums by ADX is killer stuff from start to finish. Mm-hmm. And then they signed to Noise Records and did a 4th album, started to sing in English, and it's just standard thrash. It's just not as good. But ADX have a personal experience with that. Right before COVID, if you remember those dreadful years when we couldn't do anything, like the days before everything shut down in Sweden, me and my wife, we went to Paris to see ADX on a boat on the river.
Oh, nice.
With another French band opening called Titan, if you know them.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah, but it's an old French band from the 80s. The entire lineup of Titan was actually in a band called Killers before that,
Oh yeah. Hmm.
except the guitarist. So Titan is actually more Killers than
Okay.
Killers after that. And the Titan live album is very good because it has the best Killer song and the best Titan songs. And it has a flying cock on the cover. So there's no reason not to get that. But however, we were go to Paris, see ADX on a boat on the river, and just hang out and have a great time. And then went home and didn't see a show for 2 years. So ADX, I will never forget that show, and it's so good band. That is a band. I mean, this may be just 5 bands here today that everybody should pick up, and ADX is one of them. There's no reason not to pick it up. It's so good. It's killer speed metal.
Agreed. Yes, they're definitely one of the must hears. And I think a lot of folks have, but just in case someone hasn't, check them out. All right, Marty, what is your next recommendation?
Well, from here on out, my stack is kind of all over the place, but that's okay.
That's okay. We haven't touched on it yet, but yeah, I mean, the French scene, has been very varied. They touch on a lot. They may not have had a big thrash scene, I'm not sure, but definitely other genres they cover pretty well.
And we'll go to death metal here. This was a favorite. When this came out, I listened to this endlessly. Abject Offerings by Merciless.
Great album.
This album is great. And I always say it, I have to bring it out. The Substance of Purity song, that would hit the stereo. Rewind. I bought the tape first. The CD came later in my journey here. But the first 2 albums, this one and Colored Funeral, were the 2 most widely available. After that, they put out, I think, a Bad record. Kind of changed.
Yeah, they got weird around.
They got a little groovy, 3. The whole Entombed thing.
The 90s problem.
So many bands said, "Hey, let's get groovy," which worked for some, didn't work for others. And Merciless, it didn't really sit with me. But they're back together and they're putting out good albums again. I just need to get back on it. But this one, it's very European sounding. You got a little bit of a Van Drunen, less raspy, a less dehydrated sounding Van Drunen vocal style. It's just, but you could understand what he's saying. He enunciates well. The songs were very well written. They were old school riffy, good melody lines, just really solid, well written death metal. I mean, it's not reinventing any wheel here, but we don't need it to. As long as there's good songs and good riffs and a singer that's out front and confident, this really ranks up there as a top album from Europe. Oh, and it's from France on top of it. So. Yeah, I was excited to show this one because this is an old favorite for sure. On the Restless label. Bigger release, for their debut record on, I don't know what that might be a different Restless than I'm thinking. But anyway.
Yeah, wait, Merciless. Colored Funeral is the second one, and people like that one a lot.
A little bit more complicated, but it's still good. It's a good album.
Yep. And yes, Simon's right. The album they did last year, they just got signed to Osmos and put out Those Who Reign Below in 2024. And it is a really solid album of old school death metal. It doesn't do anything new, but it does that style extremely well. It was another good example of a sort of veteran band bouncing back in 2024 and, putting out a really nice release. I meant to review it for the channel last year, and I just never could quite get it worked into the schedule. But it's very solid. And reportedly, their last few albums have all been good. I just haven't checked out the other ones that came before it. But yeah, Those Who Reign Below, it flew under a lot of people's radar because there was so much sort of high quality death metal from 2024 that got a lot of hype. And Merciless kind of got overlooked, I feel. But if you're looking for one that's excellent, that, isn't on $20 spin and didn't make everybody's top 10 list, the Merciless album is definitely one to give a spin.
Yeah, I'll check it out.
Merciless was a band that you heard about in Sweden early on. I think it was because there was a Swedish band with the same name.
Spelt differently, but yes. Yep.
Yeah, but
right.
I think that they changed the spelling because of the Swedish band.
Oh, okay.
I think so. But they're really good, but not as good as the Swedish. I'm absolutely clear. I reviewed the 2 demos by the Swedish Merciless is coming out on vinyl this year, very soon, in a week, I think.
Oh,
And
nice.
I reviewed it yesterday, and those demos are in 87, 88. There was nothing in the world as fucking extreme as that. So that is something you should get.
Who's putting that out?
Is it called Death Shall Rise Productions or something like
That
that?
sounds familiar. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I I don't remember, but it's something like that.
Yeah, and Death Shall Rise has been doing a lot of that kind of stuff. They did the Unleashed demos and the
it's
Desultory
them.
demos last year too.
I helped them with that too. So
oh, nice.
My brain is getting fried.
I'm having trouble with that too. All this information I used to carry around, it's leaking out somewhere. I don't want to know where, but it's leaking out. All right, Daniel, you're back.
Am I back?
The bathroom. I'll be right back.
Well, I just want to mention very quickly, we spoke about Sortilège, and before they made the record for Devil's Records, they were on an Ebony compilation album.
Oh, that's
Metal,
right. Yep.
Metal Warriors, and it's all sort of good stuff, but it's Sortilège, Cyclope de Letang, and I just want to mention that the version of this, the demo version, is 1,000,000 times better than the one on the album. This is the Sortilège track on this. It's like that's the top of the, it as good as 80s metal ever got. So, and this is a very good compilation overall. So you better get it.
Yeah, that's Ebony put out a lot of those compilations, and some of them are hit or miss, but that's probably the best of the batch from Ebony.
Another one we should get back to is this one, Metal Plated.
Yep.
From Ebony too. And this is concerning French metal. This is essential. I get back to that. Where were we? Oh, I should probably do another old French band that I think this record made it a little bit all over the world. Yeah, Ocean. And this was, I would say, this was the first French hard rock band. They started in 1974. And this album is the last album of the original run, came out in 81. And it is a pretty basic heavy metal record with a heavy metal guitar sound. Middle of the road, nothing special about it, but I know many people who liked this when it came out. However, Ocean made an album back in 77, probably, as far as I know, the first French hard rock, but it's much more prog than hard rock. But that album is really good. I don't have it, but that's the best Ocean album. So if you ever find it, you should pick it up.
All right.
It's a typical example of a band that started as prog and then gravitated to metal and then quit. So, but it's a pretty good band. So, and those you can find for like $10. So pick them up. It's well worth your money.
Right on. Okay.
Another coffee.
Uh-oh. There you go, Alan.
All right. Let's go a little deeper for some French bands that, again, same time period, like mid-late 80s, but didn't actually get an album out, at least not until much later. First one that I want to mention along that line is a band called Legend. Now, Legend's a pretty common name among heavy metal acts.
Stupid cover.
There's Legends from the UK. There's Legends from the US, and there was one from actually two from France. But the one that I'm talking about made this one single in 1988. They had some demos as well. They did a really good demo in 1987. And for anybody that does like a lot of downloading or looking for these kind of demos from different sites online, I've seen some sites have these with very different years on them. Yeah, somebody sent me a copy of one of these Legend releases and had the folder marked 1983, whereas everything else I've seen has always indicated that the single was 1988. But yeah, this is another one that's just very good, straightforward, classic heavy metal. Again, a vocalist that got that pure kind of voice, a little bit towards the higher end of the register. The songs here are relatively developed. They go through some different pacing changes. They've got a good sort of epic feel to them at times, but they're not just, straightforward one-dimensional, two riff kind of songs. They're a bit more involved in this. Yeah, the cover art for the single here is, kind of classic 80s, single artwork. It was just a small independent, release as a single. It wasn't on any kind of big label. The band didn't really get anything else out at the time. However, they have resurfaced in more recent years. They had an anthology collection put out where you could get the single, the demo, and also a live tape, I think it was originally, that they put out around 1989. And apparently they got enough interest that the bands decided to release some newer material, which you can check out on Bandcamp. So this is the album they've put together more recently that you can check out over there. They've got a little bit more material as well. This came out in 2022, and I didn't know this had come out until I was, kind of following up and brushing up on the band for the show. So I haven't had a chance to listen to it in depth. But yeah, kind of cool that, a band that never really got a chance to do an album back then, has finally come back around, gotten their old material reissued for folks to check out more easily. And actually have an album out that you can access online. There are physical copies available too, but if you just want to have a chance to preview it, see what it sounds like, hop over to Bandcamp. You'll probably want to type in the title, and I'll take a stab at it. French, not a language I'm fluent in at all, but looks like Les Derniers Anges. I'll type it in the chat for anybody who might be interested. But yeah, just another really good French band operating in that kind of classic traditional heavy metal style there in the mid to late 80s.
All right. Well, I'm sticking with death metal, and brutal-ish gore death metal is not my thing. But a long time ago, I don't know if it was for Maniacs or somebody, it might have been for Wormgear. I went down to Ohio Death Fest, and they got this French band to come over called Morgue. And not gonna lie, they kind of blew me away. And they brought the brutal death thing, but introduced, there's a definite grind. The speed is very grind-esque, a little sloppy at times. But yeah, I picked up Art Gore, I think at the show. Came out on the Bladed Records. But yeah, these guys are really freaking great. And then there's another one that came out called The Process to Define the Shape of Self-Loathing. There's a song on here called My Life is Sicker Than Your Band. Pagan Human Form. I don't know. Here they started to get a little bit more refined. But on this stuff here, it's just brutal, but a little grindy. Live, they just completely tore it up. I mean, that's where this style of music seems to work. Seeing it live, witnessing it happen. Because typically on CD, a lot of this stuff just kind of melts together for me. But seeing them live was the kicker I needed. And listening to this stuff, there is a little bit of uniqueness mixed in with this. So yeah, this isn't straight up brutal death metal. It's got a grind, a filthiness to it. And it's French, so it doesn't sound like every single other band out there. I think someone just reissued this stuff. I don't remember where it was in Ohio. I went to a Cleveland Death Fest, and then there was an Ohio Death Fest, which was in a different town. It wasn't Cleveland. It might have been Cleveland. I don't know. My brain is mush at this point in my life, so I have no idea. But, yeah, Morgue. Check out Art Gore.
I have seen them too at one of those death fests, and I can't remember which one. So
yep.
You're not alone there.
Did you like them?
Maybe Maryland. Yeah, it was, it's that kind of music that when you see it, you like it, but then afterwards you can't really.
It never really finds itself. I mean, since I haven't listened to this since I bought it, like the month probably after I bought it at the show. So
I like the band name. That's why I remember it.
Yeah, and there was the U.S. Morgue as well from Chicago, who are killer, super killer. All right, Daniel, you are back in rotation.
Well, I'm gonna go back to some early French heavy metal again, and probably my favorite heavy metal album cover of all time. The first time I saw it, I was like, what is this? I need to have it. Just look at that cover.
Cool.
Nice.
I don't know this one.
It's the like an Italian thriller, heist movie. A
Yep.
guy completely dressed in leather, just stopping a very nice looking car. This band is called Attentat Rock. And this album was, I think it was a private press, the first. The original is impossible to get. This is a re-release that came out maybe 10 years ago or something. I don't remember. But this is very laid back hard rock. It's like Thin Lizzy, early Thin Lizzy. Very nice songs, super good playing, and classy heavy metal with French lyrics. And I love that album to bits. A little bit later, they got signed to Devil's Records and released this album, which is way more 80s heavy metal. And the first album is early Thin Lizzy. This is Thunder and Lightning Thin Lizzy.
Gotcha.
And really good, really, everybody's good. Good drummer, good guitarist, good vocalist, French lyrics. It's all you can ever want. So, unfortunately, the first album I got with them was this one, the last one they made, and it is not good. And you can see they started to look like this, and you just know it's not going to be good. And the lyrics are in English, and it seems like they were written by Paul Stanley. It's about girls, and it is just awful. They made two such killer albums, and then they just released that crap in the end. It breaks my heart. But those two first albums with Attentat Rock, you really should get them. If you like Thin Lizzy, you will love it. And the second one is like Thin Lizzy, Judas Priest. I mean, like every French band is inspired by Judas Priest. But that's one of the better ones. And you should get it. But the first one is my favorite. It's very soft and good. Also very hard lyrics about throwing bombs into banks and stuff. It's like...
Right. All right. Alan.
Good deal. Yeah, a band I've heard of, but again, never really got a chance to check out. All right, let's do another 80s French project that didn't get past the demo stage. And another band name that is pretty common and has been used many times around the world. Slaughter brings up many different bands, including Mark Slaughter projects, but there's a French Slaughter, and they made one demo back around 1986. Now, this is not the cover of the demo. This one got reissued on a small label called Fils du Metal, which is run by a big collector. As I recall, he technically lives in Germany, but he was like, right on like the French border. And so kind of, he always had, had a very good collection of, all kinds of European metal stuff. And he started kind of, digging up some of these things that had only been like demo or cassette releases, tracking the bands down and pressing them up on pretty limited vinyl releases. And this would have been around the 2010, thereabouts. This one, yeah, he did in 2010 for the Slaughter demo. The logo and stuff, kind of looks like it's maybe going to be something a little bit on the heavier, more extreme end of the spectrum. But the picture says, no, probably not. And what it ends up being is, just another one of these bands that, has, that kind of heavy, Iron Maiden and Judas Priest influence. Really good songwriting, excellent performances, had a very strong vocalist. The demo's got 3 tracks on it. There wasn't a lot of stuff recorded by the band, but, and this isn't a knock against them, all of the songs are quite long. They all run like 6 to 7 minutes. And it always felt like, those songs probably should have been just a little more compact, trim like, 90 seconds or so out of each song. And it probably has, a little more impact on the listener, but they're very, very well written nevertheless. And it's just a very good example of, a band that was obviously quite talented. They just, for whatever reason, never had a chance to put out any physical product. And again, I'm blanking on the guy's name who used to run SWEDIsh Death Metal, but he was very good at identifying those kind of things. And he didn't stick to just European bands. He dug up some obscure US bands and did the same thing for them. There was an Ohio band called Thruster, and they had a cassette only release in the 80s. He put it out on vinyl for them, and it's amazing. There wasn't much he could do about the production issues on some of these, so sound quality can still be a little off, but just very cool that he was able to get some of these things out on a physical format other than cassette, so that they're have a better chance of being preserved for longevity. So yeah, the SWEDIsh Death Metal things not always that easy to track down. Like I said, they were in kind of small quantities, and it's been a while. It's been a minute since these came out, but if you stumble across them, for a reasonable price, they're good ones to pick up. So French's Slaughter, just a good example of that style.
All right. Someone mentioned them earlier in the chat, but yeah, Darkenhold from France. This is their third album. Castellum? Yep. Castellium? I don't know. I can't read. It's dark in here. My eyes are shot. But this is come out in 2014, I believe, and it's kind of the epitome of castle metal. You hear that term kind of thrown around these days with the rise of bands like Obsequiae and others, Wield and Woe and other bands like that. This is just very mid-paced black metal, but it's got those medieval feeling riff or melody lines. It's kind of bouncy. There's a bounciness to it. It's dark. It's interesting. And the melody makes this stuff very catchy. This is their third album. I think I have one more after this. They put out, I think, 2 more after here. I think this is their best out of what I've heard. And all of it's solid, but this one just has a bit more playful melody, which, you add playful with black metal, you're like, ugh, what are you talking about? But no, there's just a spirit to the music. It makes it, well, castle metal, the medieval vibe. It's just, I don't know how else to explain it, but yeah, Darkenhold is definitely a band to check out. I believe they're still active. They've put out 5 or 6 albums now. So check them out. Darkenhold. Daniel.
Well, now I'm going to take one of the big ones. One of the records you could find in Sweden back at the time, because it was released on Ebony, a British label that their records were in Swedish stores. And it's the band Demon Eyes.
Oh, nice one.
Simon was just asking for that one.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
but this is a fucking killer record. It's so good. It's just as good as any international heavy metal. And the vocals are fantastic. And the lyrics in French, which for Ebony, I think it's the only one on Ebony that doesn't have English lyrics. And it's so good, and I love it to bits. And what else to say? The little bit of a problem I have with this record, like every Ebony record, is that the guitar sound is the same of every Ebony release, because they use the same studio and the same guitar amplifier for every band. And for me, that's the guitar sound of Chateau, because that was the first one I got, Chained and Desperate by Chateau, which I also thought was a French band.
Yep. Happens to all of us.
Yeah. Kind of the same thing Noise did with Harris Johns. I mean, he was kind of the house engineer for a while.
However, you should get this Ebony compilation, Metal Plated. They have a Demon Eyes song demo version, which doesn't have that guitar sound, and it's so much better. It's just killer. And this also have songs with other French bands that are better than the albums. So all the French bands were absolutely amazing on the demo recordings, and they should have released albums out of the demos, because they were fantastic. Because back then, I guess there was a few studios that did metal, and they always had the same sound. So some bands, the originality got sucked out by the studio, and especially Ebony. You can hear every record on Ebony sounds the same. And for some bands like Demon Eyes were better than the Ebony sound. For Chateau, I think the Ebony sound was perfect. It's
yes, it really worked for them.
Yeah. So I mean, Demonize that's just an album everybody should get. It's as good as most heavy metal from the 80s. Just get it.
Yep, that's a great pick. And yeah, you're exactly right about Ebony's always been noted for having that issue. They had good bands on the label, but everything sounds the same because of the way they kind of just had them on the assembly line.
Yeah.
All right, Ellen.
All right, so I've got one more obscure French one from the 80s. So this band never even got around to a demo. They had 3 songs on a compilation. And this actually came out in the earliest 90s, if I remember right. And the funny thing is, I've never even heard the entire compilation. Somebody just sent me the songs by this one band years and years ago. I'm like, you'll like these. And yes, I do. And it's another name that's very, very generic. So, there's this band's name has been used a ton. The band is called, wait for it, Satan. Not the most original, perhaps, but they showed up on this one compilation, which may have only been a CD release. I'm not sure. It's called Avant Hard. Yeah, that's that. I wouldn't go there, but there you go. Yep. And I don't know if all the bands on this are French or not, but again, the band here is Satan, and I'm guessing this is a clip of a picture from the CD thing. There's not much about them that I've been able to find out. So this is what's listed on Metal Archives for them, just this kind of red and black picture, real simple logo. But yeah, they've got these 3 songs on this compilation, and they are fantastic. Very well composed, just, high energy, traditional metal, maybe leaning slightly towards a power metal sound, but not your stereotypical European 90s power metal at all. Great vocalist. The songs switch it up very well. Lots of moving parts. Just really fantastic stuff. And as you can tell from a little poking around, none of the band members have other projects. They didn't just change their name and go on to something else. They did 3 songs and disappeared. And it's a crying shame. So yeah, there's not much else I can say about them. If anybody else has information on this band, would love to know about it. But if you ever run across this really weird titled compilation thing, and yeah, it's from 1993, which might have been part of the problem. At least, the Satan material does not sound like it's from 1993. It sounds like it's from maybe 1987, give or take a year. But yeah, if you ever stumble into this, it's the kind of thing that you really wouldn't look twice at, because they didn't even put anything like actual logos. It almost looks more like some kind of punk release with the just the what do they call that letter styling where you just snip out the letters? Ransom ransom letter style print for the band names. And again, I have no idea. The other 4 bands might all be Taylor Swift prequels for all I know. But
I wonder about the band Shark. That's a good band name.
You've got they are metal sounding names. You've got Shark. You've got Wolf.
That's about your animals.
Yep. Dilemma. I'm guessing it's supposed to be Dilemma. It's Dilemma, but might be French for dilemma. You've got 22 LR, so 22 long rifle, and MKZ, which with the Z in the way, I can't even come up with something funny that could stand for. My knotted zipper. I don't know. But yeah, if anyone's got more information on that, I'll hop over here in the chat for a couple of minutes and see if folks can enlighten me about any of those bands or that compilation. But the Satan tracks, if you can find them on YouTube or something, fantastic. If they're not on YouTube, maybe I'll feature those in an upcoming video over on Let's Talk Metal, because they deserve to be heard.
All right. Well, I don't know where to go with it. I'm just going to do this because this little group of heathens, it seems like in black metal circles, the LLN, Les Legion Noir, kind of a big deal, and the stuff was like as anti-music as you can get. Vlad Tepes, War Funeral March, Mutilation, Grimly Reborn, Black Millennium, Belketre. I think this is a bootleg of some sort. I don't know. There was a hot minute where I liked this stuff just because it was so anti-music. It floated in and out of timing. It was messy. The vocals were just stupidly grim. It was juvenile, completely 100% juvenile. You had, scenes in Norway and Sweden and Finland boiling up, gaining popularity, and this stuff seemed like the anti of that. I don't know. I don't know if it was just because if they were trying to play this crappy or if they were just not good at their instruments yet. I don't know. But there's a charm to it, and it is a part of the French scene that happened, and it was kind of popular, it seems. The stuff was hard to find, reissued, and on questionable labels throughout the place, but I don't know. It's just one of those things. Like there was a hot minute where I really enjoyed this stuff just because it was so raw, and but it's another one of those things that hits the rack and never comes off again. It's just, there's better things to do with my time listening these days, but yeah.
It was an interesting scene because it obviously got very little attention early on because it was so tight knit and had so little distribution. Because even like into the early 2000s, you could get a lot of those LLN titles for just a couple of dollars off of different distros. I mean, they could not give that stuff away even as late as 2002 or so. And then, at some point, it finally started to click with people and became this huge thing. And then all of a sudden, she had bootlegs floating around and people passing off other, they go and record their own crappy stuff in a bedroom and pass it off as some LLN tape they discovered, and people would start bidding for them on eBay. You're right that, it's obviously very primitive, very raw. Some of them have, pretty, there's some interesting structures there, and some of the guys could, they could write good songs. I think they could write, beyond the levels of their talent in some cases. Like Vlad Tepes, some of those songs actually are pretty cool songs. They're just sloppy players, whether intentionally or just don't quite have the chops for it. Some of the Belketre stuff is they've got some weird ambient pieces that are actually quite nice. But I mean, it's an episode and a scene all to itself. Mutilation, of course, is the one band that has stuck around and put out stuff. They had an album just last year, I think, on Osmos.
They did. Yep.
So it's its own rabbit hole to go into. If folks ever do that, it's really complicated because there was never a lot of documentation at the time about bands and lineups, and people it was a small group of people, but they tended to use pseudonyms, so it could be like the same guy could appear on 3 different demo tapes for 3 different bands and use 3 different names. So you really got to dig deep to figure out who was on what, which releases are legit, which releases are, just made up. There's a lot of, because again, a lot of it was like in French, there's been a lot of typos and song titles as this stuff got circulated in the underground. You're writing all these song titles on a little tiny cassette J card to send to somebody who doesn't read French, and you start having all kinds of errors pop up, and so people have songs listed you may not recognize just because the title of the song has gotten butchered when it got copied and recopied and recopied. So
that's
definitely
right.
something
They made up their own language. That's right. I remember hearing that.
They had they supposedly had their own. It was more of a code than a language as far as folks could tell. And most of a lot of the words were kind of obvious, how they were just swapping some letters around and stuff. But all kinds of crazy stuff. Some of them supposedly lived in the woods, kind of, for a while. And
sure.
Stranger things have happened. I don't know. But it's an interesting scene if you want to dive into it. But be prepared for some very raw, very sort of amateurish sounding stuff. And you have to be prepared to put up with like a lot of blind, dead ends and stuff. If you're not careful, you'll start looking for things that never existed in the first place, basically.
All right, got that out of the way. Daniel, what you got?
Well, I'll take you back to some really
There we go.
basic heavy metal. There's no mystery about it at all. And that's a band. It's another band that was released by Ebony, the second French band released. It's a band called Nightmare. And they did 2 records on Ebony. Oh, this is the second one. And this is just regular heavy metal. There's nothing special about it. There's nothing bad about it. It's nothing exceptionally good. It's just a solid heavy metal band. The thing about this band is that they seem to have changed member a ton. I mean, so many member changes. And so there's a different singer on these 2 records. The one on the first one is, according to me, a better one. So I like this record better only for that, because they sound very similar. And they sound a bit Swedish. They sound like a mix between Axwitch and Mindless Sinner, I would say. So it's a, very, you can say generic, but solid heavy metal with the Ebony guitar sound. So you got that. But it's not any worse than any other band on Ebony. Not any better either, but it's a French band that sing in English, and that takes away a little bit of the mystery. So they sound Swedish, because it's the same broken English as Swedish bands has. So they could be from Sweden, they could be from Norway, they could be from anywhere. But solid band, good records, and especially the first one. That singer has a unique voice, and I like that. Apparently, after those 2 records, the drummer started to sing, and they just continued on. But I haven't heard anything past those 2 Ebony records. But if you see them, they're well worth having. They're cheap and they're good. So, like any Ebony record, it's just good, and they're from France. So you have to get them out of the way. And here we are.
All right, Alan.
Okay, time for me to switch gears a bit. A big French band we definitely have to bring up. They were controversial. Some folks have issues with them, and understandably. But Deathspell Omega has been a big thing, not just on the French scene, but on the entire black metal scene since the mid 2000s. This album in particular, they kind of started that. Earlier stuff has a different sound. With this album, they really started redefining what black metal was going to be like moving forward. Within a couple of years, they went from being a band that sounded like they were copying other black metal bands to having other black metal bands start to copy what Deathspell sounded like. This is the 2006 album, Si Monumentum Requires Circumspice. Deathspell Omega, it can be very dense. It is not an easy listen. There's, tons of, philosophy stuff and lots of religious stuff worked throughout it. Musically, it can be very challenging to listen to. They're good songwriters and musicians. They know what they're doing, but, they're writing something, that is, meant to be very obtuse and, very hard to kind of penetrate at first. And this is one of the albums that I think is a little easier to get into. My first experience with the band was the one that came after this, where the title is something like Fay in Ignum. To this day, I can't.
That's like a jazz. That's like a weird black metal jazz record. It's weird.
To this day, I cannot make heads or tails of that album. At the time, I despised it. I remember kind of ranting about it on old, online metal forums, just saying this barely sounds like music to me. And later, folks were like, you probably should have started with this one. I'm like, okay, we'll give it a chance. And yeah, other parts of their catalog I like better. I haven't heard all of their stuff. I know some of their releases here and there. Again, for folks, that, really, avoid bands, that, have, ties, to more extremist stuff. This may be a band you do not want to check out. And, hey, that's your choice. That's fine. I'm not trying to cancel them. I'm not, promoting them, saying they're the best thing ever. I get it that they're not going to be for everybody. but they are, a huge band that has come out of France and probably had a big or bigger an impact on black metal than anything else that came out in the 2000s. Off the top of my head, that's got to be one of the key releases from that period in black metal history. Again, it really kind of reset the direction that black metal was going to head into after that. And one little thing I'll just mention along with it, if the band has never done very many interviews or anything, information about them has always been kind of limited. If you're interested in a very academic breakdown of each of their albums, our friends over at Radical Research recently published the second issue of their zine, which is kind of this is like a small square book, basically. It's called Deserts of Hex, Volume 2. And they have something like a 65-page, chapter that kind of, and they have different writers break down each of the different Deathspell Omega albums. So it's a very academic take. They're doing it from the viewpoint of guys who are very into progressive rock and progressive metal. They're not diving into all the, issues, with affiliations that band members and non-members have had and all that stuff. They're not, promoting that stuff. They're not slagging that stuff. They're just breaking it down musically. So it's an interesting read. Some of the essays, very enlightening. Some of the essays are almost as hard to read as, the Deathspell lyrics can be. These guys took it very seriously, and they really went in. Some of them really went into the full academic mode, breaking down and describing the albums. But anyway, yeah, a band that, has their controversies, not for everybody, but a huge part of France's black metal scene. Can't really do a show on French metal and not mention them. So definitely wanted to go ahead and cover Deathspell Omega.
Yeah, they're a weird band for sure. We shared rehearsal room with a band called Vatain a long time ago. And Eric, the singer, he had a fanzine, and he had an interview with Deathspell Omega in the very early 2000s. And it was the first time I've heard of them. So, and then I checked them out, and he was very into finding weird and strange band all over the world. Mm-hmm. And he introduced me to them. And some of their stuff is really good, but some of it is just not good, according to me.
Yeah, agreed.
So you have to pick and choose with them. Mm-hmm. But I have the same problem. It's another band from France called Peste Noire.
Yep.
That I
Folks
think
were
is
talking about them. Yep, in the chat earlier.
A really good band, but I can't stand some of the controversy surrounding them. So
they're very blatant about their racism.
Yeah, and that band in particular, they are. Yeah, Deathspell tries to obscure some of that stuff a bit with some technicalities, which we don't need to go into here. But Peste Noire don't even bother trying to do that so much.
The trajectory of Deathspell is what's weird. I mean, they started out just kind of a traditional, no frills, churning, unrelenting black metal band, and then like a light switch is flipped, and they started getting complex and nightmarish and polluted sounding, and like bending chords as they're picking them, just to give you that fun house feeling. It's really weird how they arrived at where they came from and where they ended up. It's weird. Yeah,
you're right, Mark. They very quickly went from just one of the bands in the crowd to one of the bands that was leading the crowd in a completely different direction.
Yeah. All right, I guess it's my turn, and
it is your turn,
being it in black metal because that's just kind of where I navigated with this stuff. Antaeus, Cut Your Flesh and Worship Satan. This is one of those bands. They're just completely brutal, and not in the. It's just like anti-melody. The vocals are just completely caustic, like he gargled acid in glass, and just out of key, dissonant, fast. It's one of those types of, it's a type of black metal that it holds you down in the water and won't let you up type of thing. It's hard to listen to, but there was an attraction of it. It was very, very aggressive, very, it seemed like they're out to hurt the listener type of thing. I don't know. That sounds cheesy as shit to say stupid stuff like that, but at the time when I heard this, I was attracted to it because it was so extreme, but they made it hard to listen to. It's not one of those records you want to put on, like, in the night side Eclipse. The melodies, the synth layers, all that stuff. This here is just caustic, scraping, grinding, nasty dissonance in the guitar riffs, and just a vocalist that's having an episode while he's singing. It's one of those things. And then pictures of them cutting themselves up, and as their promo pictures, I mean, blood. I guess that was their big PR campaign back in the day. But I don't know. Again, the French were so hard to nail down when it come to black metal. They were kind of all over the place. You got bands like Deathspell, you got the LLN, which were like the, behind the dumpster of a bar type of black metal. And this here is just the mental asylum black metal, but it's well produced, which makes it somewhat more easy to try to absorb it. If this was like super raw, nasty LLM production, it would have been just completely, a mess. But I don't know. This is another one of those bands that when it came out, I listened to for a bit, and it sat on the shelf for years. I just never find myself in a mood to listen to it. So
the cover isn't so inviting either.
No, there's nothing about the cover that's. It's just, again, it's a mess. Oh, there's a razor blade in there, and the rest of it's just Photoshop layers. I don't know. Good, very good, very aggressive. A super mess. Exactly, Jason. All right, Daniel.
Speaking about inviting covers, this one, it just screams by me.
That's the mascot that ate Tior.
Well, this is just wonderful. It reminds me of a Swedish artist called Hans Arnold, who made covers for Wolf and ABBA and all sorts of bands. But this is the very first release on Devil's Records, High Power. And this is a fantastic record. This is just the style of killer heavy metal you want to hear. And they're a band from Bordeaux, one of the first French heavy metal bands. They started in 1977. And they are like a 70s Judas Priest. And they're so good. Wonderful single, great songs. And everything about it is. They did another album. It's not as good, but it's still good enough to pick up. But this is just pure quality. And it's one of those bands from France that just makes you love French heavy metal so much. And I couldn't believe when I found this record, because you never see it in stores. And if you do, pick it up. So this is from 1983. Devil's Records released 2 records in 1983. It was this one and the second Attentat Rock. So this is what kickstarted that label. And they couldn't have started with a better band. I just love it. And look at those guys. They just add it.
No zebra pants anywhere to be found.
Nah. And in 1983, I mean, they are as good as, Heavy Load or any of those. This is just quality stuff. And I mean, to have this on the T-shirt will make you the center of any party. I just love it, and that's one of those bands. You must pick it up if you see it, and just wonderful stuff. It's them, Sortilège, and a couple of other bands. They are like the ones that makes French heavy metal so fucking cool. Just. They had killer bands that I never heard of when I grew up.
Right. And
to discover them when you were in your late 40s, it was like wonderful. It's like being a teenager all over again. Like when you discovered Judas Priest, Accept, and Iron Maiden. You could do it again with the French bands. So if you haven't discovered it yet, I suggest you go and dig those up and just have a second youth.
All right. What was the name of that band? It was High Power, or was that the name of the album?
No, High Power. Both the album and the band.
Okay.
It's called High Power.
Yep.
High Power.
All right. Get his killer cover.
Where is it? Oh, it's written down there. under my fingers.
Awesome. All right, Alan.
Okay, we got the controversial band out last round. We'll go with something a little less controversial, although even this band's had its controversies at times. And another big one folks have mentioned all night, Alcest. These guys have, of course, become a huge name in sort of, the post-black metal universe. Yeah, they did start out, early stuff, a little bit darker and harder. But, by this album, this is the third one. Again, I'll take a stab at the title. Les Voyages de la Mai. Gorgeous cover art with the, I'm assuming it's a peacock. I don't know. Birds are not my thing. But
other than sex condors, right, Alan?
Well, that's special. That's when that's kind of meta type birds. Not this is just some kind of bird, but it's pretty, and the music's very pretty. Mostly a one-man project, as far as I know. Nej has steered the band in a different direction. After that, early material, and is kind of become the godfather for the whole post black metal sound. For some people, this is like the most amazing music. It's their favorite genre. For other people, it's too lightweight. It's just a step too far. They're not into those kind of sounds. They want their black metal to be more fierce, more raw, more cult. Not have these really pretty kind of uplifting, lilting melodies and stuff to it. I like Alcest. They are not something I play very often. I got to be in just the right mood. But when I am, very cool stuff. They just released their latest album in 2024. It got extremely good reviews. Mike Seatown was kind enough to review the album for us here at Heavy Metal. He's still going very strong. He still really has a good mastery of the material. Hasn't slowed down and been putting out this is the third album. Since then, there's at least 2 or 3 more over the years. So he's built a good body of work without it starting to sound tired or rehashed or anything. So he's still managing to create stuff that's interesting and inventive in this style, at least in my opinion. Again, I get that some people are just not into this particular sound, in which case you're not going to like any of it. But Alcest is still, kind of, the standard for this type of stuff. And they definitely have to be mentioned as one of the big things to come out of France in the 21st century for heavy metal. So, Alcest, obviously, big shout out there.
All right. Okay. Well, another big band that has a weird trajectory, and he changes in between albums frequently, and that's Blut aus Nord.
Yep, been leaving that one on the table for you.
I think the Mystical Beast of Rebellion and the work that transforms God are the two most nightmarish. Still kind of clinging to the black metal essence. Just again, the bending the strings while they're playing, chords, and it just has an unsettling Funhouse Mirrors type of feeling. This album here, this is Satyrian poetry. This is the more Norwegian feel. You can tell by the cover artwork he was going for that too. Necrolord, Christian Wallen artwork. And it's a band that there's some albums I love, but don't listen too much. And then there's some albums that it's too much. It's too avant-garde. It's too out there. Like the band, was it Mort? Or the album Mort. It's very one-dimensional. All the songs sound exactly the same. It's just hard to listen to. It's hard to listen to. But this one here, like I said, it's more in the confines of a genre that's easily acceptable for me, and that's the Norwegian stuff. But again, it's a band like Death Spell Omega. It started off kind of regular, normal black metal, and as they went, they got way more dark and twisted. It's the French thing. All I can say is it's a French thing. There's like this weird darkness that permeates some of the stuff that choose to explore it. So I don't know. It's an interesting project, and another band that has gotten quite popular throughout the worldwide metal sphere. So definitely check it out if you've not heard Blut aus Nord. if you're into Norwegian black metal, this Saturnian poetry is a good place to start.
Yeah, it's a hard catalog. I mean, it's a long catalog.
Yeah.
And like you said, Marty, it varies a lot. So
Yep.
it can be hard to pick a starting point. Like I think Rheinpest just mentioned, this album. This is another one that's really good, like the one you showed, but it's a very, very different style of album.
More psychedelic, isn't it?
Yeah, this one's got more of a psychedelic kind of sound to it. This is the Hallucinations album. And then the two they
yeah, you guys pretty
obvious.
obvious.
They're not hiding it.
Yeah.
But then the two they've done since this, those have that really dissonant, and I mean really dissonant sound to them, which they're good. They're very well done. But yeah, real nightmare fuel kind of stuff. There's like so much, studio manipulation of the guitar sound that it's hard to even tell at times. Is it guitar? Is there a vocal buried in there? Is it a synth layer that's buried in there? The music is so distorted that it's kind of hard to pick out what is what within those two Disharmonium albums that came out since Hallucinations came out. But yeah, then you've got albums like the one you showed, and it's again a completely different direction. So interesting band. If you hear one album and don't like it, you could listen to 3 other albums and have 3 completely different experiences. And some folks asked in the chat earlier, so I'll just repeat it here. Some folks were asking, like, where to start with Bluedos Nord. Is there a deep dive that's been done? Jeff over at Gas Masks and Hand Grenades, they did a BAN deep dive a while back, so check his channel. I think it's one that he had to split over 2 episodes because the catalog is, I don't know, I want to guess 14 albums by now. Yeah, he's been quite prolific over the years. A very interesting project, but yeah, you just have to be prepared for one album may sound nothing like the album that came right before or right after it.
All right, Daniel, get us back to heavy metal, my man.
I will. I will take you back to the early 80s. And as I said, I grew up in the forest outside a city called Avesta, which had 20,000 people. But where I grew up, it was about 1,000 people. It was nothing, no restaurant, no bar, no nothing, no stores. And I was into metal. So how did you get to know about bands? Well, we had a hot dog stand that also sold magazines and rented out horror movies. And it was a Swedish magazine at the time called OK. And this is a book about those years. And that was a music magazine that had all sorts of music in it that teenagers liked, and a lot of heavy metal. And also they had, girls that wasn't dressed very much. And
Woohoo!
There is a picture here that combines that a lot of heavy metal and a lot of girls. And this is the typical page you will find in that magazine.
I love it.
Yeah. But on the back cover of every issue, not every, but most of the issues was a company that sold records. And the back covers looked like this. You can see, there it is.
Huh.
And it was always heavy metal albums. And you ordered from there. And it was mostly the regular stuff, like Judas Priest, Iron Maiden, and later Creator, Metallica, all of so. But the few French bands that they had was Demon Eyes, Sortilège, and this band called Hush Bomb.
There it is.
Or H-Bomb. And this
People have
was
been asking for a long time in the chat about H-Bomb.
Yeah.
Yep.
Coup de Metal on Rave-On Records, like Sortilège and Merciful Fate, of course. And this is a really, really good EP. So good. And Hush Bomb in Swedish means, hashish bomb. So it makes you think about doing drugs instead of the nuclear holocaust. So we love that.
Right.
But that was an album you got in '84, maybe. So that was one of the French bands that early on I had and loved. And then they were, I think they were the only band on Rave-On that actually stayed to do an album. Attack which is also really good. But the EP is like all those bands, Merciful Fate, Sortilège, and Hush Bomb. I think the EP is the best work, and it's so they had it down from the beginning. So, but Hush Bomb is just again top quality metal that everybody should own. I regard them in the same, maybe not as Judas Priest or Iron Maiden, but they are as good as Heavy Load or those bands. And it's just a quality French band that had an impact on me from when I was like 11 years old. So they will stay close to my heart forever. And French lyrics, which makes them better than they actually are, I guess.
Right. Okay, good one, Alan.
All right, I want to change gears here. A few folks mentioned this band early on, and bonus points for that. Let's switch gears into French power metal, which there's been a few good bands.
Oh, I hope you say the one that I was going to warn people of. Go ahead.
I don't know which one. I don't think it would be this one. This is a band called Heavenly.
Nope.
Heavenly did about 5 albums, never got a ton of attention. First couple albums I remember being decent. They sounded relatively straightforward for like early 2000s power metal. And then by like albums 3 and 4, like this one, which is called Dust to Dust, it's a concept album about vampires, so that hence the title and why it looks like there's a vampire exploding into dust on the cover. They had really kind of ramped up their sound. They started to get faster. They started to get tighter, really building a lot more speed into the music. In my opinion, it was a change for the better. That they went from kind of like a good but kind of straightforward power metal band to like someone that was really ramping up their sound quite nicely. And as I said, this one was a concept album. It has kind of an Anne Rice type of story in the lyrics if you care about that kind of thing. But excellent, really sharp and fast power metal structures throughout it for sure. The one that came after this was called Virus. That one didn't click with me for some reason. So that's kind of where I lost track of the band. And I couldn't even tell you now why the Virus album didn't sit with me right. But, the earlier stuff is good. But yeah, the one I would recommend at least is the Dust to Dust album shown here. And some folks in the chat that were talking about them earlier might have some other recommendations out of the catalog. But yeah, France had some cool power metal bands. I'll mention another one on the next go around for folks that dig that kind of stuff. What's Sunday saying here?
They're saying, "Oh, I thought he was going to work in some Halloween here in this episode somehow."
The
French Halloween is called Halloween.
Yeah, what would I compare Heavenly to? Maybe like the faster gamma ray material. Not as crazy over the top as Dragon Force, but maybe somewhere between, something between the fastest gamma ray material and not quite Dragon Force type pacing. But really good. I mean, they hold it together. It's not silly or, kind of goofy the way Dragon Force can be. But yes, quality French power speed metal, but from much later. Let me check the date on this one again. I had this album years ago and mistakenly kind of traded off. This was a 2004 release, so it's been a minute since these were out. If you come across them in a used bin or something, pick them up. Good stuff.
I was going to say my research of bands from France, and I've been on a Daniel said that he found the French metal thing and just was like dove into it. It was so much fun. Well, I've been slowly getting into that with power metal, and there's a band from France called Fairyland.
Yeah.
Oh God, it's I kept seeing it on them on eBay, a bunch of albums. I'm like, all right, I'm gonna check out Fairyland right now. It is, I've often said, put aside your problem with cheese, and you'll enjoy power metal more. That is a band that I could not put aside my my.
Oh no.
Yeah.
I had 2 of the Fairyland CDs once upon a time or two. Those I got rid of, and that was not a mistake. That was very intentional.
Yeah. Oh,
it's like somebody take these off my hands, please get this out of here. It was every bad power metal cliche turned up to 11.
Very fruity tooty power metal.
Very lightweight sound and structure to it. No, those were a big disappointment.
Yeah.
But those are long gone and they ain't coming back. The Heavenly, I would pick that back up if I stumble back into it. But
Fairyland.
Yeah.
No,
Once I thought about it, I
bueno.
knew what you were going to say.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm riding out here kind of on black metal, but I'm going to butcher the name. Pensis Nocturnus. This is an early album of theirs. This might be the debut. Vacuum. This is a very weird avant-garde based black metal band. It's kind of like exactly, Jeff. The name Fairyland was a huge indicator that it was probably going to suck. But this is a band I kind of started and stopped with right here, and it's very well done black metal. It's a bit crazy. It feels like you're under the big top. There's a circus vibe to it. I believe Jeff in here from Gas Masks and Hand Grenades has really been kind of smitten by this band, and I think their avant-garde side is really, they've nurtured it over the years. So again, France has got a very atypical way of looking at some of this stuff, and the things they put into the music, unless of course you're Fairyland, where then it's a fail. But here, this was a little bit too out there for me to take. That's why I never really fully pursued their catalog. I'm sure if I listen to it now with a little bit more mature ear, I might like it a bit more. But because I even had trouble with some stuff like Arcturus back in the day, the second Arcturus album,
La Masquerade.
that is again a very circus vibe to it. And, the only song I really liked on there was the Seaman song, the dark.
You might want to rephrase that.
Isn't his name Seaman? Is that his name? Vortex.
Yeah, I'm just saying.
Anyway, Pensis Nocturnus. Check it out if you're a little bit more adventurous. You like the avant-garde side of black metal. It's avant-garde black metal, Wade. It's got a circus vibe to it. Check it out. All right. Daniel.
Okay, so I think I'm going to just leave the heavy metal for a little bit and dip my toes into extreme metal. That I was listening to when I was a teenager. And this record was a huge deal back then. And it's the split between Loud Blast and Aggressor. And both of these bands started in 85. And you could say that they are both like the in-between thrash and death metal, that those bands that just pushed the limit of thrash metal that time. And I know this was a record that everybody had when I grew up. You were just there was so few bands around, so you bought everything you can get your hands on. And this was something you could get your hands on. And it was from France. There was Loud Blast, Aggressor, and a band called Massacre. Those were the three bands we listened to and talked about. And I know that in Norway, Euronymous and those guys hit up a friendship with the Loud Blast very early on and went to see them. I think it was in 86 with Metallurgy, and took the train down to France and hang out with them. And I think they even wanted to release them on the record label he started later. I'm sure about that, but I know that they were one of the very few bands in the early extreme metal scene in Europe that you cared about. And I listened to that a ton when I grew up, and I love it, and I still love it. And it just you were very open back then. If you found a band from another country that played extreme metal, you were so happy.
Yeah.
And you like, oh my God, it's going on over there too. But sadly, I didn't find many other bands from France at that time. But you looked all over for the...
Those are kind of the three biggies. I mean, for me, I heard of them too, but I never wanted to pay the import pricing for them.
Yeah.
You know?
And then you heard about, from Italy, Bulldozer or Schizo. And then you heard about the band from Japan, and you really wanted to get that. That was the philosophy back then, very expanding mindset. And then later it got very protective, and it's our scene, and everybody else fuck off. I never liked that. I love the 80s philosophy that the music is the important thing, and whatever is good, and we want to hear that. And Loud Blast Aggressor, mind-blowing record at the time. Maybe not today so much, but I still hold it dear to my heart. And this is probably getting harder to find now, but you really should pick it up if you're interested in late 80s extreme metal, which everybody should be. So that's one to get.
We talked about earlier how your parents said no computer, that's American stuff, you have a guitar instead. It's kind of amazing. You read about the Swedish guys. Well, I think a lot of people did, Norway too, all over the world, but the whole tape trading, the letters, sending tapes back and forth, that was the internet. That was the underground internet back in the day. That's how you found out about all the bands in Brazil, the bands in Japan, the bands in Argentina, it was
a very slow internet.
Oh yeah. Yep. Yeah, never once did the internet ask you to return stamps.
Yeah.
Or send IRC or all that fun stuff.
But then you had those guys that they function as as the main server hall or hub, like the drummer from a Swedish band called Tribulation. He had all the demos before anyone else, or Nicky Andersson from Entombed. There was a few guys that you could get from them. If you heard about a band, you can contact them. Do you have this demo? Yep. $2 and I'll send you the copy.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. The pusher man.
Yeah.
All right. Ellen.
All right. I promised another French power metal album, so let's go with a band called Lone Wolf. Again, a lot of these French bands don't come up with, they either have a completely unique name or they have a very generic name. And there are two French Lone Wolves, so it's this one, not the other one. This band's been around for about 20 years. They have a lot of albums out. The one I'm showing here is from 2014 called Cult of Steel. And this is pretty easy to describe. It's sort of a French version of Good Running Wild. Very much has that kind of vibe about it. It's not about pirates, of course, but sort of similar strong song structures. Vocalist is kind of in that same wheelhouse a bit. I haven't heard much else of their catalog. For whatever reason, this particular album got a little bit of press when it came out in 2014. I would see it come up on a few different, like streaming sites and things. So eventually I went ahead and checked it out. And a very solid album, quite good. But then the band just kind of disappeared from everybody's radar again. But they've still been around and put out a lot of albums since this one. But if you want something in the vein of Running Wild, and at the time, 2014, Running Wild was, off the radar completely. They had retired, come back, made some crappy albums, retired again. They're back around now and doing decent albums once more. But at this time, that ship had sunk, and Running Wild fans were quite happy for bands like, Blazing Stone from Sweden and Lone Wolf from France that were doing that same style of heavy metal leaning into power metal and doing a good job of it. So this is a fun listen. Nothing original. They're not reinventing the wheel or anything like that, but very solid power metal for folks that like the more traditional side of power metal. Nothing fancy or frilly. There's no fairyland about this. This is kind of the opposite of fairyland while still being in the power metal category. So Lone Wolf's The Cult of Steel will be my pick for this go around.
It's funny, the Running Wild thing. There was a while ago I was on Bandcamp sniffing around. I rarely go on Bandcamp, but I was sniffing around one day, and there was a bunch of bands that are kind of ripping off the Running Wild sound right now. It's like usually one or two dudes, like a one-man project type of thing. Mm-hmm. It's like a pirate-esque cover on the album cover, and it sounds like throwaway Running Wild songs. And Blazing Stone did a good job with it, though. They really did. I've got all that stuff. It's fun. It's good stuff.
Yeah, there's always been a steady trickle of Running Wild clones or wannabes. Some former members had a band called X Wild back in the 90s.
Yeah.
That project didn't quite work for me. I I didn't feel like they quite had the chops for it. There's another really good one with a funny name. I think they're from Japan. I'd have to dig around to look it up. They only did like one short release, but it's really, really good, and it's just dead on Running Wild. I'll look it up while you take your turn, and I'll post it in the chat.
Oh, I'm next. Okay. Shown this band on here before. Of the French black metal bands, this is always one that resonated because it sounds very Scandinavian. And Nahima, Light of a Dead Star, it's a debut from this band. Members of this band went on to also do another French, more Vikingish folky black metal band called Himmelbjorg. So yeah, where Ravens Fly is the Himmelbjorg stuff. It's solid. It's it's got a little bit of a pagan-y vibe to it. This here is just straight up orthodox black metal, no frills, but decently produced. They had 3 albums. All of them were really good, really solid. And yeah, a band that was maybe a bit, if they came out today, maybe they'd be a little bit bigger. I don't know. Hard to say. But, yep, Nahima, check them out. Good stuff. I've got 2 more.
2 more rounds sounds good to me. Yep.
I have tons of more.
With you?
Well, you can, at the end, you can go through your stuff. We're not going to stop you from that.
Sure.
But I also try and take in consideration it is super late where you're at right now. It's almost 6 in the morning.
I have no problem with that.
Okay.
Okay, so let's I just go to the heavy hitters. This is one of the very best bands from France, and it's Blasphème. They made 2 albums, and they're both killer. This is, Merciful Fate mixed with Judas Priest. It's absolutely fantastic, and it's one of those bands from France that was as good as anything internationally. And I absolutely love those records. They have this evil, sinister feeling about them, and the songs are so good, and the vocalist is killer. But as always, this compilation, Metallplated, Blaspheme's best song, Jehovah, is on this one in a demo version, which is much better than the album version. This is as good as Merciful Fate. And this you can pick up for like $10 anywhere if you find it. And just get it. It's the most well spent $10 of your life. But Blaspheme, you have to get those records. I mean, doesn't matter what they cost. You have to have them in your collection. They are as essential as Don't Break the Oath or Melissa. Fantastic. On this one, this is a more heavy metal record. This has a little bit of 70s influences still, and a couple of heavy metal bangers. But this one is pure heavy metal, the second album. Even though, don't let the cover fool you. It looks a little bit jokish, but it is. The first song on this, Soul, is such a fucking killer song. It's Merciful Fate wished they wrote that song. It would have gone straight into one of their albums. And the French lyrics just give it another dimension of otherworldliness. I can't explain how much I love this band. You have to get it. Fantastic.
We'll check them out. Especially throwing on Merciful Fate, the classic era Merciful Fate. I'm like, okay, I'll check it out.
Oh, so good. So good.
Goldie Wax, yes. Daniel showed Rites of Chaos a little earlier.
All right, Alan.
All right, let's see. I want to say my favorite one for last, so that means I bump this one up. I always forget the title of this album because it's relatively new to me. But we've got a band called Chaos Echoes, and this is their second album, Transient, which came out on Nuclear War Now. Somebody sent this to me for free. I had never heard of the band, didn't know anything about them, but they grew out of a band called, I think, Bloody Sign, which was getting into kind of a little bit more of a technical death metal style during their particular run. And it's a pair of brothers. They apparently wanted to start working in sort of more of a drone style with the technical death metal aspect. So it's kind of a weird unique fusion. You still have, some of the technical death metal from their past project, but they're getting more dissonance and more droney elements worked in by this. Again, this is the second album under the Chaos Echoes name. It's an interesting combination. It is not something you're just going to listen to on a lark. This is not put the top down and drive around on a sunny day kind of music. The songs tend to be pretty long, and it can take them a while to get where they are going. For a while, I was convinced this was going to be an instrumental record, because for like the first 10 minutes or so, there's no vocal lines or anything. And again, it just kind of very gradually builds up with a lot of dissonance. But it is sort of an interesting listen. And apparently their third and last album, they did go fully instrumental on. There's maybe just a few vocal lines here and there. But yeah, something kind of different. I'm not sure it's something I'll be following up on. But again, it was one of those just kind of freebies in a package. I'm like, okay, I don't know what it is, but I'll give it a spin. And it is a pretty interesting style. And again, the band has sort of an interesting history for how their sound developed across the span of a couple of different bands. So yeah, if you want some sort of different experimental death metal, the Chaos Echoes, the first two albums tend to get pretty good reviews. Again, the third one's completely instrumental, so if you like purely instrumental music, you might dig that one more. Other people might prefer one of the first two. So Chaos Echoes, another kind of like we've said, French bands were not afraid of experimenting and trying some very different things. And this is another project that kind of embodies that very exploratory kind of attitude.
All right, I lied. I'm only going to do one more. The other one I was going to show is really crappy, so I'm not even going to show it. This one I have not listened to since I got the promo for it. It's called Killing Process by Contreras. So yeah, this is on the Adipicer Records label.
Oh, yeah.
And I listened to it today. I'm like, I saw that this band was French. I'm like, oh, I have one of their CDs. So I threw this in, and it sounds it's got a Florida vibe to it, very slight. It's like early Atheist and early Cynic, like demo era Cynic, but not as good. Not this. They've got a very technical bass player on here. There's a lot of tricky bass stuff going on with the fingers, but the music doesn't really follow suit. The music doesn't get super technical, which I'm not saying that's a problem. I kind of like the fact that they didn't go crazy with it. There's just little nice bass flourishes underneath some of these riffs that it really makes the songs nice. But yeah, it's pretty much a pseudo death, some thrashy elements at times, but it feels very early Florida without sounding super Florida. It doesn't sound like a rip-off of those bands, but it sounds like a band that was maybe influenced by the early Cynic and early Atheist, but wasn't quite there in their musicality yet to get the full impact of it. But the album, it's 9 tracks long. It goes a little long, but it's pretty decent, well produced, good. It was cool to, like I said, I don't know when the hell this came out. It came out in it's not gonna tell me. But it's an older promo, and it was nice to pull something off the shelf that I haven't spun since it came out. That happens. You have a big collection. There's a lot of shit that's lost and buried in time and dust.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Daniel, what you got?
I have a lot of albums. I'm gonna take one unknown band for just because this is a band called Execution, and it's death thrash style of band. This is from 1992, and it's a private press, 1,000 copies. It's not the best of bands, but they are decent enough to have, and I picked it up. I had no idea they were French, but it turned out they are. But this one, the thing is, you can go on Discogs right now and pick this home for $20, and it's a private press, 1,000 copies. So I expect after this episode, these will be gone from Discogs. Because it's good enough to have, and if you don't buy it now, you might never have the chance again, because this is a rare record. Not
It's
the best.
a solid death thrash, you said, kind of thing.
Yeah, it's just a standard death thrash.
Yeah.
It's nothing spectacular about it at all. But this cover, just that.
What the hell is going on?
What the hell is going on? And the
I'm
logo
not sure.
it's just falling apart. It's like execution. And you have to. I mean, it's so cool. Everything about it is cool.
Yeah.
And it's just a tip if you want to get an early Death Thrash album for no money, you can go and get that.
Already it's happening.
Simon's buying them as we speak.
But nobody has heard about them. That's why they're so cheap.
Right. And I mean, private pressing 1,000 copies, I guess that's a bit ambitious if you've got no story behind you, you know?
No, I mean, it's a lo-fi recording, and the songs are not that great, but those are the kind of records I really like to have. The unknown, that was created in a vacuum, more or less. People just did it, and
it's done for the passion of doing it. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, Alan.
All right, so my last band for the night. This is an old favorite that almost nobody seems to know exists, and kind of tied to Marty's last pick. This was also on Adipochere originally. It's a French band called Calicia. I've also heard it pronounced Calicia. I'm not sure which way it is, but they released one 4-track EP in the mid-90s called Skies. I'm pretty sure this is a bootleg copy. The print's pretty crappy, but it says Skies there. The band's kind of little logo things up there.
Have you shown this before? It looks familiar.
I've mentioned them. It's been a minute. It's not a band that comes up very often. But I think this was just a demo they had sent to Adipochere, and it just ended up getting released pretty much as is. So, the sound quality is a little, subpar, but it cannot hide the fact that it is really good, sort of adventurous, progressive melodic death metal. Those are the key adjectives to add to the sound here. It is not melodic in the sense of like Gothenburg melodic death metal whatsoever, though. It's very much got its own sound going. There's a little bit of different instrumentation used at times. Some piano parts worked into it. Really, really excellent stuff. I only know about this for 2 reasons. One, I did see it from time to time listed on old flyers from Adipochere, but that label's stuff was always a pain to get in the US. Always had, issues with distribution. A lot of bands that released stuff on Adipochere were never happy with the way their stuff came out or was released. The second reason I know about it is this was something that was kind of randomly added into a tape trade I did back in the late 90s. Everyone who did tape trading, you know how this goes. You'd each agree on like, okay, I want this stuff from you and I want that stuff from you. And you kind of figure out, it's like, well, it's going to be about 4 90-minute TDK tapes to cram all of that in.
Maxell XL 290s.
We usually went with TDKs because they were cheaper. And Maxwell, I had problems with the fancy Maxwells, but that's a discussion we don't need to start. Anyway, if there was time left, you could fill it up with whatever you wanted to and give people like, hey, here's some other cool shit you might like. And in some giant tape trade I did with a guy in Louisiana, he included Calicia Skies in that kind of, extra time. And I was immediately blown away. I thought it was fantastic stuff and didn't really hear many bands ever try to do something similar to what Calicia did. And, again, this is late 90s. Your internet's pretty limited. Could not find out anything else about the band. It turns out they kind of, they didn't go away, but it took them a very long time to get around to doing anything else. They wanted to do a full album, and it took them 6 years to write and record it. This is from the time they started recording to the time they actually wrapped it up. So again, the EP came out in 95. This means it was a total of 14 years before the album came out in 2000. Wait, did I do my math wrong there? No, yeah, the album didn't come out until 2009. The album is called Sibion. This is it. There's also a Japanese pressing that has a similar layout, but it's more of a greenish picture here instead of this image. This is a, let's see, progressive melodic death metal science fiction concept album. So it's one gigantic interstellar story that covers like billions of years worth of human evolution and all of this kind of stuff going on with interstellar travel and the end of the universe and virtual reality and AI systems. It's a crazy over-the-top science fiction story. It's incredibly well put together. The performances on here are top-notch. Everything they did was extremely meticulously put together. The album runs exactly 1 hour, 11 minutes, and 11 seconds because they wanted the runtime to be 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. So they timed it down to the second. The booklet is almost more of a book. This thing goes on forever. And almost every song has its own, piece of artwork. You can kind of follow the story just from the art that they had done for it. And it's not just like crappy early 2000s, Photoshoppy kind of stuff either. It's actually really nice looking backdrops for all of the lyrics. For the alien parts, they actually have a unique kind of a language and glyphs to actually write out when different alien races are talking and then translations of it down below. They spent 6 years putting all this shit together.
This is Alan. This is Professor Steel Metal right here, everybody. This appeals to the professor.
It really does. You can nerd out on this thing to an extensive amount. But again, at the end of the day, the key thing is the music, and the music is fantastic. What's we got there, Simon?
Simon says, "Christ, this is nerdy."
It is extremely nerdy, but it's extremely, extremely good. I would recommend it for fans, for example, of Cynic. If you like that style of progressive death metal, but leaning into more melodic territories. Cynic would be an excellent, kind of comparison. Maybe Atheist. Maybe Atheist gets maybe more jazzy. Sections of this actually, if anything, lean again maybe towards very fast, power metal structures for some guitar solos. But there are laid back sections to it too. There is one section that leans towards a little bit of a jazzy sound. If the album's vocally is still pretty harsh. And it's the one stumbling block for some folks that I've sent copies of this to over the years. Because you hear the music, it starts out with this huge, big symphonic overture, and people are kind of expecting a cleaner vocal approach. But they do some vocal treatments very similar to Veil of Maya off, Cynic's Focus album. They do a couple of different harsher vocal styles. Some of the vocals sound slightly black metalish. I've never figured out if they're trying to tie different vocal styles to different characters in the story or not. Maybe not. But the vocals, they seem to be the sticking point for some folks. But yeah, this is obviously their magnum opus. They haven't done anything since, and I don't know if they ever will. I was really, really kind of happy to see when I, again, brushing up on this stuff over the past couple of weeks. The album has got actually 6 reviews on Metal Archives. I assumed it would have 0, but 6 people have reviewed it. It has a cumulative score of 97%, with multiple reviewers saying it's possibly the best, melodic death metal album they've ever heard. And it deserves that level of praise. The second, it's a 2-disc set. No, we're not quite done. I want to geek out for at least 2 more minutes here.
This is like the bat signal to all the nerds are awakening in the chat. I'm saying, I'm going to go check this out.
If you like this, if you'd like that adventurous sci-fi stuff, like Traveler by Lord Weird Slothfag, just in terms of concept, having this big interstellar drama play out in your metal. Here you go. The second disc has that 1995. They redid kind of the tracks from the Skies EP, so you can hear all of that stuff with better sound quality, which is nice. and there's a handful of cover songs, and I think the cover songs, I'm just going to read them off because I think they shed some light on where this band is coming from in terms of influences. Bonus tracks we have, let's see, you've got, where are they? Right, you have How Could I, cover of Cynic. You have A Fortune in Lies, cover from Dream Theater. You have I Am the Black Wizards, cover from Emperor. And you have, and it works. And you have This Dazzling Abyss, covered by Loud Blast. So yeah. I mean, a very eclectic set of cover songs that you show this band appreciated. Acts that really capable of more progressive and high level musicianship. Last piece to wrap up my Calicia nerd out. In between the EP and the album, the guitarist was involved with another French project called Chrysalis. They made this one EP. It's called Between Strength and Frailty. He's the only Calicia member involved in it, but the music is pretty similar to what Calicia did. Again, progressive death metal on the melodic side, but also played, very, very competently, very skilled musicians, songs that go through a lot of different parts and changes, but not to the point of being obtuse, still maintaining that kind of melodic death metal strain at its heart. The Chrysalis EP, you don't see it around all that often, but it sells for like $5 or $8 if you find it on a distro. So it's really easy and cheap to pick up. The Sibian album, sometimes you can stumble it into it cheap. Sometimes it's a little pricey, but if the kind of stuff I described is in your wheelhouse, look it up online if you don't want to pay for it. Check it out. It's a really cool album from a really cool project. In a way, it's a shame they didn't do anything else, but my God, they put so much work into this one. They might be still working on album number 2. Who knows? So yes, Calicia, kind of an unsung French band that I like to hype on those rare occasions I get the chance to. And now I have, and I can end my night happy.
Avengers
Marty,
assemble.
Exactly. I'll hop over to the chat if people need more information on that. And Marty, do you have anything else, or do we want to let Daniel run through his other highlights?
Daniel, do his thing.
All
okay,
right.
I'm gonna run through a bunch of records very quickly.
Absolutely.
I think,
take your time. There's no time. There's no.
Yeah,
we're not turning into pumpkins.
I'm gonna end with my favorite record from France ever. But I start with a band called Warning. That's a French early heavy metal band that they were on Polydor, so it's a major label, and they played, it sounds like mainstream metal. Very good, but the singer sucks. So this is a hard listen through. Luckily, they changed the singer for the third and final album of the original run. So if you're gonna get one, you should get this one.
What the hell is a chicken?
Yeah, it's a French chicken. Metal chicken. Much better vocals than the first 2 records. So I would suggest, if you want to check them out, this. But this is mainstream metal. Pretty good, but you've heard it all before. Another one, early French, Voix de Fée. This one came out in 1982, so it's one of the earlier heavy metal. And this is solid heavy metal. Really good, and not as good as Sortilège does, but same style. And pretty awesome. And this is the only record that was later re-released by Devil's Records. It's the only re-release on that label. That should tell you something of the quality of this. So I have the original press, but I would love to get the Devil's record as well. Cool looking cover. I mean,
yeah.
There's no way you're gonna pass this up in the record store.
Different, yeah.
And I do this fast. We have this band. It's kind of a joke metal band, which you can hear. The Satan Jokers.
Someone just mentioned that. Yep.
Yeah. And they made 3 records. And the first one is the most metal one. And this is pretty good heavy metal. And then they made 2 other albums. And they are all over the place on those records, like new wave. And I guess the lyrics are joke metal, but this album is pretty solid and well worth listening to. And you can see we covered it. These guys are out to have fun.
Yeah.
Look at those pants.
Oh man. Obviously not American.
Yeah.
Those pants would look slightly less impressive.
And this is one of the band. I mean, Devil's Records released a ton of similar sounding bands. And just like Chateau sounds like a French band, this might sound like a German band, Der Kaiser. But this is a French band that is in the Sortilège vein, not as good, but worth picking up. Solid, good heavy metal record. This one is even better. Stratson. This is like Sortilège, but with more gruff vocals. And this is one of the better Devil's Records. Good looking cover too. I like that guy. Looks pretty evil.
Yeah.
This is one of the lesser Devil's Record. Square. You can hear the band name. They're pretty square. And the album is called Rock Stars, which is stupid. So many French records are called something with rock. I guess they like Rock Stars, and then they changed the name to Still Square, which is beyond stupid. So this one, you probably don't need to pick it up, but if you need a complete Devil's Records, you need to have it.
Parallelogram was too hard for their fans to chant in a concert, so they had to go with Square.
Here is another one with a rock in the title, but this one you need to have. Volcane. Rock and Roll Secateur. This is the French Motorhead. It's really doesn't sound like the other French band. This is really good music, Motorhead worship. Super good band, and I mean, I could listen to this any day. One of the better Devil's Records. Even the second album is good, which is unusual. Then we have the most unusual of the Devil's Record releases. It's a band called Monsieur. And this is probably next to Bathory, The Return, and Seven Churches, the most extreme album of 1985. It is so fucking brutal, but it is different because they had an electronical drum kit, so it sounds like from outer space. It doesn't belong in this world, and I don't know if I like it, but I would never get rid of this record. You just have to have it because it's so different. Just brutality. I mean, the songs you can't remember anything about them after you heard it, but it's just that it exists, and it's French. Fantastic. At the end of Devil's Records, they started to release a bunch of records that are not as good as the earlier ones. They started to fade, and one of the first I picked up was this band called Raz, An Autre Vie, which is standard heavy metal with semi-gruff vocals. But the thing is, they decided the lyrics are in French, except for one song, which, strangely enough, is the title track that they translated to Another Life, which doesn't make any sense. And I can tell you immediately which one of the guys decided to do that. Which one do you think was inspired by Britain of these guys? What we have here is basically four guys that could have been in Bulldozer, and one guy that could have been in Def Leppard.
Well,
That's exactly the band I was going to name.
I don't want to tangle with the dude with the chest hair. That guy fuck you up in a heartbeat.
Those guys are brutal.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure the English guy there is the drummer. It's the only one they knew who played drums.
Yes, he looks like he might have wanted to be a roadie for Rick Allen.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a decent album. I mean, well worth having. And I like the cover. It's a crude spaceship kind of painting.
Kind of cool.
Yeah. And this was the first Devil's record I ever picked up by chance at the secondhand store. So It has a place in my heart. And this is the last metal record that Devil's Record ever put out. Jinx is another rock and roll title. Stand up for rock and roll power. And now the lyrics are in English, and the music is, balls to the wall, party heavy metal. You don't need this, but the cover is kind of cool. And it's on Devil's Record, so you need to have it. All right, that was my quick run through until I get to the best French record ever released. And this is also Devil's Records, and it's a band called Voodoo Child, Adrenaline. And that cover,
That's cool.
You can't go wrong.
Very cool.
And I think this.
Oh wait, he's shooting something out of his eyes.
Yeah, he is. He's burning something with his devil eyes. I think this record is very expensive, mainly because of the cover. Because there isn't a single guy that into occult metal that doesn't want this, based on the cover. And that's why I wanted it in the first place too. And it's the hardest one to find of all the Devil's records. And this band only made this record, and that's it. They just disappeared, and I don't think anyone ever played music again. But this is, once I got it and heard it, super quality stuff. It's a perfect mix between Judas Priest and Merciful Fate. Very laid back, soft sound that I absolutely love, and the vocalist is just killer. It's so good, absolutely fantastic. There's so many good songs on this. Everyone is a hit, every song. So I also had to get the re-release that some Greek label did, because it's No Remorse who did this. It has 2 bonus tracks with a band they had before Voodoo Child called Devil Rock. They are not as good, but they are still good enough to spend another $100 to get this. Because this is getting pricey as well now, because people are starting to realize how good this band is. And if you're only going to get one French record, get this one and pay whatever it costs. It's worth it. It's the best French record of them all, by far. And I can't say enough good words about them. Have you ever heard about Voodoo Child?
Have not.
Oh,
I've heard the I've heard the name, but I have not heard that one.
And for last, there's one record I don't have that I really want, French one, and it's called Lust.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
Will Never Die. This is a fantastic record, very expensive. So I haven't been able to pick it up for a reasonable price. It doesn't sound French at all. This sounds like an Italian band. It has that weird feeling about it that Italian bands have. But I love it, and I want this so bad. Is anyone want to trade this for like a Swedish death metal record? You can get in touch, and I set you up.
Yeah. Didn't that one have like a different pressing that was a lot easier to find? But yeah, the originals are impossible. But
yeah,
I think it got licensed, or someone put it back out maybe like a year or so later. Yeah, they did,
but I only collect originals. I don't care about the represses. That's my problem. I'm a historian. I need the artifact from it. But that was a late album. It came out in 1988, so it went under the radar because it was only into extreme metal at that point. I think also it wasn't spread at all. It just...
Let's see. Yeah, Simon, that kind of price is what the Lust will go for.
Yeah, €400 minimum.
Wow.
Yeah, it's an expensive one.
I won't pay that. It's no way.
God, that's hard. That's hard. It's hard to pay that for. I mean, it's happened. People do it, which is fine. It's just wow. You really putting your trust in the seller that their description is accurate. And
well, I have a couple of yellow goats to trade, so.
There you go, people. If you want to get rid of that Lust record, you can get yourself a yellow goat, a legit copy. All right. Well, shit. We went through a bunch of French records.
A bunch of cool French stuff. Daniel, thank you so much for joining us for this. Been a fun topic, and yeah, I think everyone's spotted some things they would like to check out. So everyone's got some homework to do. Folks in the chat, thank y'all for participating. Some folks, but yeah, a lot of this has been new to them. There's been some folks with a lot of knowledge about the French scene, and we really appreciate you taking the time to watch and add your comments to the chat so folks can learn more and know things to check out as well. But Daniel, in closing, was there anything else you'd like to mention, or anything that you'd like to kind of plug for people to go check out and from your projects?
Well, we're gonna do a tour in East Europe in February, so if anyone lives there, you can. It's mainly Polish dates, but it's in Berlin as well, and in Vienna and some other place I don't remember. And then we're gonna play with Kvelertak in Sweden right before that. So if you are in Gothenburg or Stockholm, you can see us there. Then again, what should you listen to? I don't know. I get that Voodoo Child. That's just the best French record, and it's so good. This should have a major label reissued now. That's what I think.
Right on. Well, everybody, links to Daniel's stuff, his books are in the description. Please go check them out. And, I'm sure a lot of you have read this book. It's awesome. Really well done. I have not read the movie one because I'm not a movie guy. But, yeah, new book coming in a couple of years, a year or two.
Hopefully.
Hopefully. But yeah, anybody have Alan, you have anything to close with before we jump?
No, I don't. But yeah, maybe within.
Oh yeah, I have one more thing.
Oh sure, go ahead.
If you want to delve into French metal, there is a couple of books. It's my friend Pascal has made.
Oh, nice.
And these are like fanzine style. One is a bit of the history and fanzine clippings and stuff. You can learn a lot about the story. And this is there's like a 2-part book, and this is all the releases from 76 to 2016, and it's just jam-packed with stuff you never heard of. So
nice.
I got these as soon as I could.
Right on. Okay, Alan, you have anything coming up that you want to shout out?
There'll be an episode of Let's Talk Metal on Tuesday morning, same as always. I don't think I've got a few recorded, but I don't think I've got anything queued up just yet, but they will be there. Yeah, since we mentioned some pretty obscure bands tonight, I might try, it'll probably take a couple of weeks, but I will try splicing together some song clips from a few of the bands we've talked about, and maybe do like a quick French metal follow-up. So if people want to hear some of the stuff like Legend or Slaughter or some of those projects, I can provide some clips because a few of those might be hard to find. So yeah, look for that in the near future as well. I'll work on that.
Okay, as far as Heavy Metallurgy goes, show notes. Monday, there will be a review up from Mike Seatown. He covered the new Halo Effect for a review. And Wednesday, Wednesday is the album club, and we will be discussing Evoken's Hypnagogia. The latest Evoken album. So join us for that. And that's it. Daniel, again, thank you. It was so much fun. Hang on. Don't hang up. We'll chat for a minute. And everybody in the chat, you rule. Discord, go check out our Discord server. There's a lot going on there. It's a lot of fun. Link in the description. Heavy Metallurgy merch. Link in the description. That's it. Cheers. Hope your New Year's going well. Take care.
We'll see you next Friday with Hunter Ginn, and we'll be dissecting Autopsy.
I see what you did there. All right, on. See y'all.